Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 1, Coming Home. Deep in the bottom of the sea, with Beirut in the lead, the experts began to fly towards that interdimensional door. The necropolis of the gods, Linley turned to glance at it. Although they had flown tens of kilometers away from it, that 20,000-meter tall structure, the necropolis of the gods, was still as visible as ever. The side currently facing Linley was still that carving of a coiled, serpent-like wingless dragon. Upon seeing that enormous dragon sculpture, Linley's heart naturally surged with a familiar feeling. No matter what it is that is within the necropolis of the gods calling to me, I can't just throw my life away. At home, I have Delia, Taylor, and Sasha. Linley couldn't help but suddenly think of his wife and children, his heart filling with warmth. Within the boundless South Sea. Although the ocean winds weren't very strong, waves still rolled gently over the ocean's surface. The scorching noonday sun shone down upon the surface of the sea, causing it to reflect with dazzling light. Drip, drip. The waves of the sea suddenly bizarrely split apart, and the black-robed Beirut was the first to fly out from the bottom of the sea. Behind him was the war god O'Brien, the high priest, Dylan, Caesar, and Taurasi, the five deities. Behind them were those nearly 30 lucky survivors of the necropolis of the gods, the remaining saints. Whew! After arriving on the surface of the sea, Linley took a deep, greedy breath of air. This is the taste of the air of the Yulon continent. Linley raised his head, staring at that scorching sun. His face couldn't help but have a hint of a smile on it. The feeling of coming home is wonderful. Linley murmured to himself. Not just Linley. Even Barker, Olivier, Fane, Desri, and the other experts all had smiles on their faces. The Yulon continent was the plane which had given birth to and nurtured them. In this plane, their souls felt extremely comfortable and at ease. Lord Beirut, I'll only escort you this far, then. Taurasi said respectfully. Beirut glanced at him, then nodded. Fine. But Taurasi, you should know my rules. I trust you won't violate them again. Beirut gave Taurasi a cold glance, and Taurasi immediately squeezed out a smile. Lord Beirut, don't worry. The current Taurasi is no longer that Taurasi of 10,000 years ago. Taurasi said respectfully. Let's go. Beirut ordered calmly. The other experts followed Beirut and flew towards the north at high speed. Only Taurasi was left behind, staring at the endless sea. He murmured, I'm finally back, and then Taurasi dove down into the sea. Linley and the other experts continued to fly north in the air above the sea. Lord Linley, when we returned from the necropolis of the gods to the Yulon continent, it was Taurasi who opened the interdimensional gateway. It seems that one needs to be at the full god level of power to activate it. Barker and Linley were engaged in a quiet conversation. Linley nodded. That should be the case. But that Taurasi spared your life, we owe him a debt. Right. Barker nodded. But I don't understand why he did that. Linley laughed. Enough, don't worry about it. You should celebrate your survival instead. But it really is quite odd. I didn't imagine that the divine beast, the BA serpent, belonged to our Yulon continent plane, and was a magical beast of the South Seas. Linley. Caesar, who was flying up ahead, suddenly slowed down his flying speed. Flying next to Linley, he laughed and whispered, Are you discussing Taurasi? This Taurasi, 10,000 years ago, he was extremely famous. Back then, he was known as the King of the South Seas, and only Dylan was comparable to him. But of course, Lord Beirut doesn't count. Oh! Linley was secretly astonished. This BA serpent truly was extraordinary. Linley, I have to thank you. Caesar continued. Lord Caesar, what do you mean? Linley was startled. Caesar lowered his voice still further. Thank you for saving Rosary's life. Alas, Rosary, that woman, is simply too stubborn. She insisted on heading to the necropolis of the gods on her own. Good thing you were there, as otherwise, this time. Linley only now understood what Caesar meant. Caesar said resignedly, "It's unfortunate. If we deities are to enter the necropolis of the gods, we must start from the 12th floor. It would be very hard for me to acquire a demigod's divine spark for rosary. Start from the 12th floor." Linley was somewhat surprised. Right. After all, those saint-level creatures don't pose any threat to us at all. Caesar laughed calmly. "Oh, we're at the burning desert now. We're back to the Yulon continent." Linley also saw the boundless burning desert. "We're at the Yulon continent now. Everyone, go back to your own places," Beirut said. "Yes, Lord Beirut." The experts all replied respectfully, and then all of them separated. The magical beasts either flew back to the forest of darkness or the mountain range of magical beasts, while the humans flew in all directions. As for Beirut, standing there alone, he quickly disappeared from everyone's vision in a flash. What incredible speed! Linley's heart shook. Even though his power had increased dramatically, compared to Beirut, the difference was as great as that between the heavens and the earth. "Whew! Heading home." Bibi was on Linley's shoulders now, extremely excited. Linley and Barker both had smiles on their faces. Clearly, they both were thinking of home as well. Flying past the burning desert, traversing the Rhine Empire and the Rohald Empire. As the centrally located empires of the Yulon continent, the air above the Rhine Empire and the Rohald Empire was now fairly warm, and green leaves and vegetation could be seen growing luxuriantly everywhere. After passing through the territory of these two empires, Linley's group finally arrived at the Barak Empire's territory. The Barak Empire was located in the northern part of the continent. Although it wasn't like the 18 northern duchies, a place of perpetual cold, it was still much colder than the south. Right now, although it was March, many of the trees below only had bare branches, and some areas were even covered with snow. After Desri's group left, only a few people continued to fly north alongside them. 10 years. The anarchic lands have transformed so much. Flying at high speed and staring at the cities on the boundless earth below, Linley had a hint of pride in his heart. 10 years ago, the Barak Empire had only just been established after 12 years of consolidation, allowing the region to catch a breather after ending the countless years of war. But now, the Barak Empire's population had increased dramatically, and the cities had become more graceful, comparable to the previous Holy Union. Below, an ancient, plain and simple castle appeared within the wilderness. The eaves of the castle were covered with a layer of thin snow, and many guards were currently patrolling atop it. This castle was the legendary Dragonblood Castle of the Barak Empire. It had been constructed after the former Magicite mine had been completely emptied out, and was the place where Linley's family lived. "Linley, let's part ways here. If you want to find me in the future, you can come to the Arctic ice cap." Olivier gestured courteously as he spoke. "Definitely." Linley laughed and nodded. Olivier immediately left, along with the remaining lucky survivors of the Arctic ice cap as they flew north at high speed. As for Linley, Barker, and Bibi, they flew down towards Dragonblood Castle. Dragonblood Castle, the place where the spiritual pillar of the Barak Empire, Linley, lived. According to legends, this Dragonblood Castle would often have massive dragons patrol about it. In addition, the guards of Dragonblood Castle were all the most talented warriors of the Barak Empire. Nobody dared to invade this place. 3 streaks of light shot down from the skies towards the castle, while an enormous aura suddenly spread out, encompassing the entire Dragonblood Castle. Lord Linley. That familiar aura, instantly, many of the experts of the Dragonblood Castle immediately reacted to it. Whether Zisler, Gates, and his brothers, or Linley's children, all of them ran towards the rear gardens of Dragonblood Castle. because Linley and the others were currently landing within the rear gardens. The previous day's snow had yet to melt completely, and thus clumps of snow could still be seen amongst the flowers. Linley's back. Housekeeper Hyrie and Hillman, who were currently enjoying the sun in the center of the rear gardens, immediately turned to stare from afar. Linley, dressed in a sky blue robe, and Barker, dressed in a brown robe, were standing shoulder to shoulder, while the adorable Bibi was currently standing on Linley's shoulder. Uncle Hillman. Grandpa Hyrie. Linley immediately went over to greet them. Wonderful. Wonderful. Housekeeper Hyrie was extremely excited. Over 10 years. 10 full years. Linley, an old fellow, thought I might not have the chance to see you return. Housekeeper Hyrie had accompanied many generations of the barracks clansmen. He was over 100 years old now. After all, in terms of age, Linley was over 50 years old. However, amongst saints, compared to those experts who had trained for thousands of years, Linley was just a young fellow. Lord Linley. Oh. Big brother. Gates and Ank, those two huge fellows, immediately charged forward, their faces covered in excitement. Father. A deep voice rang out. Still covered with sweat and wearing just a simple cloak, a sturdily built youngster rushed forward. This youngster was over 2 meters tall, and as he ran over, he excitedly looked everywhere before his gaze locked on Linley. Father. The sturdy youngster immediately ran towards Linley. This sturdy youngster's features seemed to have 70% similarity with Linley's. Only, he was physically larger than Linley. Linley immediately recognized him. With surprised joy, he said, Taylor. Father, it's been 10 years. Taylor immediately embraced Linley. When Linley had left his home, Taylor had only been 12, and was just a child. But 10 years later, Taylor was already 22 years old. If he were to stand side by side with Linley and someone were to claim that Linley and Taylor were siblings, many would probably believe it. After all, Linley's appearance was virtually unchanged. Father, you look exactly like you did 10 years ago. Taylor was so excited that his eyes were turning red. After all, to the 22-year-old Taylor, 10 years was indeed an extremely long period of time. Linley patted Taylor on the head, a smile on his face. Linley had always felt a hint of guilt towards Taylor. A person's childhood was the most important period to them in their development, but he, Linley, had never had much time to spend with his son. Where's your sister, Sasha? Linley asked. Taylor shook his head. Sis isn't at home. She went to the imperial capital. Most likely, she'll only come back sometime later. Your mother? Linley noticed that Delia hadn't come out yet. Right at this moment, a beautiful young lady holding an infant walked out. The beautiful young woman, upon seeing Linley, had a hint of worship in her eyes. Linley glanced at this young lady, puzzled. Taylor, who is this? Jenny, quick, come on over. Taylor immediately called to her. The beautiful young woman walked over, then said, somewhat nervously, Father. Father. Linley was somewhat astonished. Taylor immediately chortled, Father, come, this is your precious grandson. He was born just 3 months ago. Taylor immediately took the infant from the arms of the young lady, then held him out in front of Linley. Father, look at how cute he is. Grandson. Linley was rather flabbergasted. He hadn't come back in 10 years. Not only had his son grown up, he had a son of his own now. Ha ha, boss. That look on your face, so funny. Bibi was laughing loudly now, and the others began to laugh as well. Only, they didn't dare to laugh as wildly as Bibi did. Linley couldn't help but clout Taylor on the head. Taylor, you little rascal. You got married and had a kid without even waiting for your father, me, to come back. Linley didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. He just stared at his grandson in front of him, with his tender, watery skin and those adorable, pure, pitch-black eyes staring at Linley in confusion. As soon as Linley had seen his grandson, he immediately took a liking to this adorable kid. Linley immediately reached out to hold the infant. Linley was extremely careful. Even when he was picking up those 3 divine sparks in the necropolis of the gods, he hadn't been as careful as he now was. "Oh, what a good boy," Linley held his grandson, a smile blossoming on his face. Taylor and his wife, Jenny, glanced at each other, smiles appearing on their faces as well. Jenny whispered into Taylor's ear, "Taylor, didn't you say that your Lord Father ripped a hellfire phoenix apart with his bare hands? But your Lord Father doesn't seem as terrifying a person as the legends make him out to be." Taylor looked at his father, Linley. Right now, Linley looked as though he were holding the rarest of treasures in his arms. "Taylor, have you picked a name for the child yet?" Linley raised his head to look at Taylor. "I have. His name is Arnold Año. Taylor said. "Arnold." Linley lowered his head, looking into Arnold's pure, jet-black eyes. He said softly, "Arnold, Arnold." This was his first grandson, and this feeling of holding him filled Linley's heart with satisfaction and fulfillment. Book 12. The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 2, Becoming a Deity. After spending 10 years in the necropolis of the gods, he came back to a grandson. This truly caught Linley somewhat off guard, but while holding Arnold in his arms, Linley still felt very happy. Within the main hall of the castle. "Taylor, where is your mother?" Linley asked. Taylor immediately began to laugh. "Father, 2 years after you left, Mother reached the Grand Mega Saint level." "What? 2 years?" Linley wasn't only overjoyed, he was also shocked. In the necropolis of the gods, he had finally broken through to the Grand Mega Saint level on the 10th floor of the necropolis of the gods. That was the 9th year in the necropolis of the gods. Compared to Delia, Linley had actually reached the Grand Mega Saint level much slower. "Delia really is amazing," Linley secretly said to himself while grinning. Taylor continued, "After reaching the Grand Mega Saint level, she went to the underground training room you always used. A while ago, when Arnold was born, Mother had come out of seclusion, but after his first month, Mother went back to continue training." "Oh." Linley nodded slightly. Turning, he glanced at the others. "Everyone, wait here for now. I'll bring Delia out soon. We'll have dinner together." Deep within Dragonblood Castle was that mysterious dimensional gateway. Only, compared to the dimensional gateway beneath the South Sea, this one was much smaller. Linley's body was already covered with a pulse-guard defense layer, and he walked in. 10 years. Linley stood in the pocket dimension. Outside of that membrane was chaotic space, and within it, Delia was seated cross-legged, meditating. Her face was covered with a holy light, and she seemed like a goddess. HRM. Linley suddenly frowned in confusion. While she was training, the aura which Delia was emitting was actually capable of causing Linley's heart to clench. Delia opened her eyes, turning her head in puzzlement. But when she saw Linley, she immediately stood up in surprised joy. "Linley." Delia's eyes instantly turned red. The feeling of being separated for 10 years truly had been hard to endure. Delia threw herself into Linley's arms, clutching Linley tightly. Linley also tightly held Delia, saying softly by her ear, "Forgive me, Delia. Linley, I've been so afraid. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to return from the necropolis of the gods." As Delia spoke, Linley suddenly felt that his clothes were growing wet. Delia was already crying. Delia lifted her head to look at Linley, a mixture of laughter and tears on her face, with tears glistening on her eyelashes. "Linley, you won't leave now that you are back, right?" I'm not leaving," Linley reassured her. Linley and Delia walked towards the stone bed, sitting down while holding each other. Right, Delia. Why is it that I have the feeling as though you are rather different compared to the past? Linley asked questioningly. Delia looked at Linley, intentionally putting on a mysterious air. Linley, guess why I am different from before? Is it because you have reached the Grand Mega Saint level? Linley asked. Delia shook her head. HRM. Linley couldn't understand it. Delia smiled, then said softly, Linley, I'll tell you big a secret. I have already become a deity. Linley instantly was utterly stunned. It was as though he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. He was speechless for a long time. What did you just say? Delia, did you say you've become a deity? Linley stared disbelievingly at Delia. How could one become a deity so easily? The likes of Desri and Fane had trained for so many years without success. Even Linley himself had experienced countless life and death battles before. Out of a lucky happenstance, he had broken through on the 11th floor of the necropolis of the gods. But despite that, Linley would still need around 10 years to become a deity. Delia had become a deity? It's true. Delia nodded. Delia, stop joking around. Linley began to laugh. If you really want to become a deity, that's not a big deal. This time, I acquired divine sparks in the necropolis of the gods, one of which is a wind-style divine spark of a demigod. You can use it to become a deity. Delia gently shook her head. Linley, watch carefully. Delia said softly to Linley. Suddenly, a strange presence suddenly filled the area. Linley felt as though he had suddenly come under tremendous invisible pressure, binding him and causing him to be unable to move. Godrealm. The experienced Linley instantly understood. But Linley's layer of pulse guard defense over his body shuddered and broke free of the binding. Linley couldn't help but feel astonished. How could a so-called Godrealm be broken through so easily? Linley stared at Delia in disbelief. Delia said, somewhat embarrassed, I've only been fusing with this divine spark for 8 years, and I've only gained insight into a small part of the laws held within it. I haven't even finished absorbing the divine spark. I can only use this Godrealm for scaring people. After I completely absorb the divine spark, my Godrealm will become a true Godrealm. Hearing Delia say this, Linley stared at her in astonishment. Delia, what is this all about? Linley spoke. Linley was truly stunned. He came back after 10 years and found a grandson, fine. But his wife was becoming a deity? Linley, do you still remember how on the day of our wedding, BB said that the violet gold rat king friend of his had given him a black stone? And then, BB had given that black stone to me as our wedding present. Delia said. Linley's mind suddenly shook. Delia, are you saying that the black stone? Linley was no fool. Now that Delia mentioned it, he instantly understood. Right. That black stone was a wind-style demigod divine spark. Delia said. So it really was the case. Linley felt that this was simply too ridiculous. It was all too ridiculous. There was no need to describe how important a divine spark was. Desri and the others had pursued godhood for thousands of years, and even Linley had only acquired these 3 divine sparks through experiencing countless dangers and near-death situations. But now he suddenly learned, that on the day of his wedding, the wedding gift he had been presented with was actually a divine spark. I couldn't believe it either, but after I began to absorb this divine spark, I knew that it couldn't be fake, right? Delia said honestly. Linley nodded slightly. At first, during our wedding, although I had bound the black stone by blood and absorbed it into my body, I couldn't sense it at all, only, from that day onwards, my spiritual energy and mage force both increased at a ridiculously fast rate. Delia said. Linley laughed. With a divine spark in your body, how could you possibly not train quickly? But I was never able to sense the presence of the divine spark. Only roughly 2 years after you left, when I reached the Grand Mega Saint level and my soul began to change, did I clearly begin to sense the existence of the divine spark. At that time, I totally understood. Linley nodded. Right. Only after reaching the saint level can one's soul truly be able to fuse with the divine spark. The reason why she had never been able to sense it in the past, and why she had trained so rapidly, had all become clear. Now Linley fully understood the reason of her rapid improvement. Delia, according to what you said, you have already spent 8 years fusing with this divine spark, but you've only absorbed part of it. Linley asked. Linley himself knew that if he didn't train and instead used a divine spark to become a deity, he would still need a very long period of time. Right. Delia nodded. It might be because in the past, I didn't have any insights into the elemental laws at all. So, just like reading a book, I had to slowly begin understanding the most basic, elementary aspects of the laws within this divine spark. Most likely, only after I finish understanding everything it contains will I be able to completely absorb this divine spark, and only then will it completely belong to me. Linley nodded. To ordinary people, becoming a deity was something that required constant experiments, and which had to be taken one step at a time. But with a divine spark, it was as though all of the profound truths of the laws were laid bare before you, allowing you to peruse them at your leisure. After you understood them, that was enough. I expect that it will take at least 10 or 20 years of hard work before I'll be able to completely absorb this divine spark and understand the profound mysteries of the laws it contains. Delia said rather resignedly. However, although I do understand some of the profound truths of the elemental laws of the wind, I have no idea how to actually use them. Linley was stunned. Delia, what do you mean by saying that? Linley didn't understand. I mean, I have some insights into the laws, but I don't know how to use them to attack. Delia said, embarrassed. Linley suddenly understood. Ha 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 ha. Linley began to laugh loudly. This logic was actually quite simple. For example, if a divine spark contained the profound truths of the throbbing pulse of the world, a saint who fused with the divine spark would also understand the profound truths within the throbbing pulse of the world, but he wouldn't actually know how to use it. For example, using the vibrations of the throbbing pulse of the world to attack was what Linley had developed into his own special attack, the profound truths of the earth. When utilizing it for his defense, it became the pulse guard defense. Understanding the profound truths of the laws was nothing more than understanding a theory. If you actually wanted to use it to kill someone, you still had to understand how to put that theory into practice. For example, if someone gained insight into the fast aspect and you then asked them to utilize the myriad swords converge, would they be able to do so? This was a form of application. This was the problem with absorbing someone else's divine spark. The divine spark only contained the insights into the mysteries of the law, but didn't include the special techniques which the original owner had used to actually apply and utilize the laws. The question of application is indeed a tricky one. Right, Delia. This divine spark of yours which possesses mysteries regarding the elemental laws of the wind, what type of mysteries does it contain? Linley asked. If it has to do with speed, I might be able to give you some pointers. Delia shook her head. I don't know how to explain it clearly. I've only managed to understand a small part of it. Okay, I can put it to you like this. The mysteries contained within this divine spark which I am fusing with is somewhat similar to the wind-style spell, Void Extermination. Void Extermination. Linley nodded slightly. I truly don't know anything about that at all. Linley wanted to help but couldn't. Linley then laughed. Enough. Delia, for now, just work hard on training. After you fully understand the mysteries of this divine spark, come up with ways of applying what you have learned. Actually, the control over wind elemental essence which the divine spark confers upon you will allow you to form a God realm, and within that realm, saints won't be able to move at all. Delia laughed as well. This was the biggest difference between a saint and a deity. The divine spark, in and of itself, represented a type of authority. Actually, the sovereigns and the high gods weren't necessarily that different in terms of their level of understanding of the laws. Only, with but a thought, a sovereign could kill a high god. This was the unparalleled authority which a divine sovereign spark conveyed. And in the countless planes of the universe, the number of sovereigns was fixed. Delia, it is wonderful that you are going to become a deity. But you have to work hard. Most likely, in another 10 years or so of training, I'll reach the deity level as well, on my own. Linley laughed. Huh. Delia stared at Linley. You'll become a deity yourself, after training for 10 years? Aren't you going to fuse with a divine spark? Don't you have a divine spark? Linley shook his head. No need. It takes a fairly long period of time to fuse with a divine spark, and in terms of effect, fusing with a divine spark isn't as good as gaining one's own insights. Linley shook his head and laughed. In the necropolis of the gods, I acquired 3 divine sparks, one of which, a wind-style divine spark, I was planning to give to you. But now it seems, that won't be necessary. 3 divine sparks. Delia was surprised. Delia, as well, understood what a divine spark represented. These 3 divine sparks could produce 3 demigods. On the Yulan continent, demigods were the most powerful creatures in existence. 3 divine sparks isn't too much. Linley sighed. This time, on my trip to the necropolis of the gods, I went to the most dangerous of the 3 necropolis of the gods. In the past, not a single person had ever succeeded. In such a dangerous place, it is only fair for the reward to be 3 divine sparks. If there had only been a single divine spark, Linley would have felt it quite unjust. Dangerous. Delia said hurriedly. Linley, tell me about what happened in the necropolis of the gods. Linley nodded, then immediately began to tell her about this trip to the bottom of the South Seas. Only, Linley remained puzzled about something. There was no question that the divine spark he had received on his wedding came courtesy of Lord Beirut via the Violet Gold Rat King. What was Lord Beirut's intentions in giving Delia a divine spark? Could it be that he didn't care about divine sparks? But it seemed that his 3 children were still saints. Linley truly couldn't understand it. The 3 Violet Gold Rat King brothers were all saints, and yet they never entered the necropolis of the gods. Seemingly, they didn't care about becoming deities. Towards the king of the Yulan continent, Beirut, Linley was beginning to feel that he was more and more mysterious. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 3, Dividing the Treasures. Dragonblood Castle. Within the underground pocket dimension. Linley's wife, Delia, was listening to him talk about the events of the necropolis of the gods. As she listened, she felt fear for him as he described encountering the BA serpent on the 3rd floor. Felt worry for Barker's near-death experience. Felt shock at the frightful power of the flame tyrant on the 6th floor. Felt terror at how Linley had nearly died under the tendrils of Queen Mother Lachapel. A million abyssal blade demons. Delia, hearing what Linley had encountered on the 11th floor, was totally petrified. When we sent our army to fight against the Radiant Church and the Cult of Shadows who had joined forces against us, I saw an army of 500,000. 500,000 soldiers already composed a sea of people, endless and uncountable. Right. They were boundless and inexhaustible in number. Linley couldn't help but think back to that scene. At that time, as soon as the experts had exited from the underground area, nearly a million abyssal blade demons, covering the skies, had simultaneously charged down while chopping down with long-range energy blades. What an apocalyptic scene that had been. That was what had caused the second of the 3 six-eyed golden Ani lions to die. Continue telling me more. How did you escape and how did you manage to acquire divine sparks in that sort of environment? Delia was nervous. Delia knew very well that right now, having only partially begun to fuse with the divine spark, she could only be considered a half-god. Even her god realm was incomplete, and she wasn't able to actually apply any of the profound mysteries in the elemental laws at all. If she had been on the 11th floor of the necropolis of the gods, most likely those masked abyssal blade demons would have slaughtered her. Linley immediately continued, describing how the experts had risked everything to charge towards the tunnel. He described how in the end, he had gone to block those abyssal blade demons, and then how he had been pursued underground before finally coming to understand the profound truths of velocity. Whew. After Linley finished his story, Delia finally dared to let out a breath and relax. Delia raised her head to look at Linley. Delia still remembered how, those years in the past, Linley had been the indomitable young genius magus of the Ernst Institute. And now, Linley was an ultimate expert who was capable of dominating a million abyssal blade demons. Delia couldn't help but feel proud of her husband. What are you looking at? Linley laughed. Looking at you. Delia's current expression was like that of an innocent young girl. Linley began to laugh. Right, Delia. What do you think I should do with these 3 divine sparks? All of those experts had hinted interest towards me. But of course, after having been lectured by Lord Beirut, perhaps they have changed their minds. Linley had to admit that Delia was much stronger than him in terms of managing human relations. Linley, geez, Delia couldn't help but laugh in resignation, shaking her head. You really, I don't even want to lecture you any longer. In the necropolis of the gods, of the humans, Desri, Olivier, Fane, Rosary, and Tulili remain. Of these 5, Desri has the best relationship with us, right? And according to Beirut, Oliver's potential is very high. But think about it. Fane received a pearl of life, while Tulili and Rosary each received a divine artifact. Olivier and Desri, on the other hand, received nothing. Delia laughed as she looked at Linley. Oliver's potential is high, while Desri is on good terms with us. Both are worthy of being pulled closer to us. But, neither of them received anything. Linley opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. Linley, your status is now different compared to the past. You are the pillar of our Barrack Empire. You can't make decisions so casually any longer. Delia said. Look, right now, in the human societies of the Yulan continent, the 2 most powerful are the Yulan Empire and the O'Brien Empire, because they possess the war god and the high priest. Only with a deity will an empire have longevity. Even if you become a deity, Linley, most likely, compared to the likes of the war god, it will still be hard for you to overcome them. After all, they have been deities for a long time. Linley nodded slightly. The power of the war god and the high priest was indeed far greater than he could hope to fathom for now. Delia sighed. Desri himself lives in the borders of our Barrack Empire, and his daughter has married your good friend, Reynolds. You should pull Desri closer to our side and let us all become one family. But of course, while pulling others close is important, strengthening our own people is even more important. Delia said. Thus, I think that of the 3 divine sparks, one of them needs to go to your little brother Wharton, or to one of the Barker brothers. The 2nd divine spark should be reserved for Desri. As for the 3rd divine spark, for now, just hold on to it, in case we suddenly need it. For example, if the war god or the high priest were to come and ask for it on behalf of a disciple. Or for example, if Dylan or Caesar came. Both are possible. Dylan has his sons, while Caesar has that rosary. For them to owe us a debt is a good thing for us. Hearing Delia's analysis, Linley felt as though the mystery bedeviling him had suddenly been resolved. All right, Delia. We'll just do what you said. Linley nodded. Delia continued, Linley, As for your 10 divine artifacts, 3 red warblades, and 1,000 regular abyssal blade demon blades, as I see it, the 1,000 abyssal blade demon warblades should temporarily be stored. They can be considered the guardian treasures of our empire. After all, every single one of them is comparable to your adamantine heavy sword. In addition, if we were to take them all out at once, a great tumult would be caused in the continent. Linley nodded. As for the 13 divine artifacts, including those red warblades, that's much easier to dispose of. Divide them out within the family. Or perhaps you can give 1 or 2 of them to Desri. The divine artifacts are easy to divide up, Delia said. Linley began to laugh. All right. However, there is one item amongst the 13 which you have to take. What? Delia asked curiously. Linley, with a flip of his hand, retrieved a set of divine battle armor from his interspatial ring. Delia, this divine battle armor is yours. Delia was stunned momentarily, then she immediately said, Linley, you are the pillar of our empire. You should be the one to wear this divine battle armor. Linley began to laugh. No need, Delia. First of all, I already have a pearl of life. Secondly, once I reach the deity level, you need to understand that the sacred Earth Guard armor spell can be used at the deity level as well. At that time, the defensive power of my divine earth armor will definitely be on par with your divine battle armor. Then give it to Warden. After all, I'm fusing a divine spark. Delia said. Linley shook his head. No need. Didn't you say it yourself? One of the 3 divine sparks will be reserved for our own people. In a few days, I'll go ask Warden if he is willing to fuse a divine spark. If he is willing, then he will become a deity. If he isn't willing, then after I finish a final matter, I will give my pearl of life to him. A last matter. Delia started. Linley, are you saying? Linley nodded slightly. I have been looking forward to this for a long time. Although right now, I don't have complete confidence, they definitely don't have the ability to injure me. Linley's eyes flashed with a hint of fierce light. Warden had already retired and given up the throne to his son, Sina Barak, who was the new emperor of the Barak Empire. After learning that Linley had returned, Warden had immediately flown back and returned to Dragonblood Castle, and Linley's daughter, Sasha, had returned as well. All 5 of the Barker brothers reunited here, and now, all of the people who had followed Linley so many years ago were together in the hall. Linley asked Warden if he was willing to absorb the divine spark to become a deity. After all, Warden was himself already a Dragonblood warrior saint. But Warden's response made Linley feel resigned. Big bro, if I were to fuse with the elemental divine spark you want to give me, after I become an Earth-style demigod, would I still be able to continue training in the elemental laws of fire? You cannot. Once you become an Earth-style demigod, your ability to sense other elements will drop greatly, while your ability to sense Earth elemental essence will greatly rise. Earth-style demigods will find it virtually impossible to gain insights into the elemental laws of fire. Big bro, do you have a fire-style divine spark? I do not. Then I won't use it. Warden's response had been very simple and blunt. As it turned out, upon reaching the saint level, Warden had begun to walk on the path of the elemental laws of fire. Although Warden had just begun to gain insights, he truly enjoyed the sensation of understanding the elemental laws of fire. Linley didn't argue with him. He understood his little brother, because he, too, liked the feeling of his soul becoming one with the earth or with the wind. He liked feeling the wind's freedom and the earth's vastness. To Linley, training in the elemental laws of wind and earth was a sort of spiritual relaxation and enjoyment. If someone were to give Linley a fire-style divine spark and then tell him to go fuse it, Linley wouldn't be willing to do so either. Because once the fire-style divine spark was fused, he would immediately become a fire-style demigod, which would make it virtually impossible for him to gain any more insights in the other elemental laws. To become a fire-style demigod and to give up the profound truths of the earth and the wind. Linley shook his head. In addition, there was a big difference between becoming a deity through using a divine spark and between achieving it on one's own. Linley then went to ask the Barker brothers. Gates and the other three insisted that their boss, Barker, be the one to fuse with the divine core, while Barker himself just so happened to like the earth style. Thus, Linley gave the earth-style demigod divine spark to Barker, who began to fuse with the divine spark and train in seclusion. In the rear gardens of Dragonblood Castle, 4 young men were seated around a round table, laughing loudly and drinking loudly. These 4 people were, Linley, Reynolds, Yale, George. It has been over 10 years since we 4 brothers have met. Come, cheers, everyone. Yale laughed loudly as he spoke. Right now, the weakest of the 4 of them was Yale, but even he was a magus of the 7th rank by now and possessed a lifespan of centuries. Their appearances still seemed very young. Boss Yale, congratulations on becoming the chairman of the Dawson conglomerate. Linley laughed. Linley was incomparably delighted to be together with his closest friends of his youth. Haha, third bro, I can't compare to you at all. Yale chortled, and then slapped George on the shoulders. Second bro, the 2 of us have been outcompeted by third bro and fourth bro. Third bro goes without saying, he reached the saint level long ago. After founding the Barak Empire and getting married, it's been, what, 24 years, right? In the past 24 years, our fourth bro, who was previously a magus of the 7th rank, is now a magus of the 9th rank. But the 2 of us. George began to laugh as well. Boss Yale, don't group me in with you. 2 years ago, I finally became a magus of the 8th rank. I'm a level higher than you. This year was year 10,034 of the Yulan calendar. Linley's wedding had been on year 10,010. 24 years. Of course, for ultimate experts, they might go into seclusion for training for a century at a time. A few decades was nothing. I've been busy and haven't had enough time to train. Fortunately, I've finally reached the 7th rank as a magus, at least. Yale let out 2 laughs. George was an important minister of the Yulan Empire, while Yale was busy managing the affairs of the conglomerate. Indeed, they hadn't spent enough time on their training. Third bro. Yale clapped Linley on his shoulders twice. Life truly is interesting for someone like you. You founded a massive empire and became one of the ultimate experts of the continent. There are so many hot-blooded youths of the continent who have set you as their goal. Those hot-blooded youths are just like how we 4 brothers were in the past. Linley, George, Yale, and Reynolds fell silent for a time. They couldn't help but think back to the events of their youth. Reynolds suddenly laughed. Boss Yale, you are now the chairman of one of the 3 great trading unions of the Yulan continent. Your wealth rivals that of an empire. According to what you say, you should be satisfied as well, right? Not yet. There's still 2 other trading unions. Yale's eyes were shining. I really want to swallow up both the Snow Island Syndicate and the Jeer Group. Unfortunately, it's too hard. Still, that just makes it challenging and interesting. Linley stood up. Right. Only something hard is challenging. Linley raised his head to look at the sky. The Yulan continent was just a material plane. In the boundless universe, there were countless planes, and above the ordinary planes, there were 4 higher planes and 7 divine planes. He himself was nothing more than at the top of the Yulan continent. Walk to the ultimate peak of training. Only that is interesting and challenging. Linley had a hint of a smile on the corner of his lips. But before that, there's still something I have to do. Linley couldn't help but turn to stare into the west, in the direction of the sacred Isle of Radiant Church. Linley still remembered the death of Grandpa Douring. Still remembered the oath he had sworn when he had left the city of Hesse and entered the mountain range of magical beasts. Radiant Church, just wait. There will come the day when I will destroy you all and pull you up by the roots. It's about time. Linley murmured to himself. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 4, A Major Event. Dawn. Sunlight illuminated the rear garden of Dragonblood Castle. For the first time in a long time, Linley had the desire to go to the rear garden and devote himself to stone sculpting. While sculpting, Linley couldn't help but think back to one scene after another of himself with Grandpa Doering. A stone's appearance, quality, grains, and coloration impact not only its appearance, but its entire potential and true form. We use chisels to remove the excess parts and allow its natural beauty to be revealed. This is stone sculpting. The stone sculpting way is really a way of controlling space and appearance. When stone sculpting, one must. The scene of Grandpa Doering teaching him about stone sculpting was still so fresh, so vivid in Linley's mind. After understanding the profound truths of velocity, Linley's straight chisel moved even more gracefully and agilely, sometimes transforming into countless blurs while at other times, moving so slowly and gently, the human-shaped stone in front of him slowly took form. Linley's carving attracted the attention of Hillman, Taylor, and many others, who watched from afar. "Father's sculpting method is so strange," Taylor said in surprise. Hillman sighed in surprise as well. "Right. Your father's stone sculpting gives me the feeling, as though the sculpture itself already exists. All he is doing is removing the excess stone and dust that is covering it up." The straight chisel flashed, and flecks of stone flew about. Indeed, it was as Hillman had said. Linley was truly just removing a layer of useless stone atop the sculpture, and as the flecks of stone flew off, the sculpture slowly began to reveal its true appearance. Shedding the shell. This is the feeling known as shedding the shell which stone sculptors talk about. Jenny sighed in amazement. "Only, I have never realized that someone could be able to sculpt in such a natural manner." Jenny herself had learned stone sculpting, but what she learned was the normal type of sculpting which required many tools. To Linley, a single straight chisel was enough. He started sculpting at dawn, and continued until dusk. Only then did Linley finally set aside his chisel, reaching out with a hand to gently stroke the sculpture. "Grandpa Doering," Linley murmured to himself. "In the past, I promised that there would come the day when I would utterly destroy the Radiant Church and pull them up by their roots. Soon, very soon, I will be able to accomplish this." The sculpture in front of him was that of Doering Coward. Doering Coward's face had that ever-present hint of a benevolent smile on it. "Linley." Suddenly, a voice came from behind him. Linley turned and saw that the speaker was actually Fane. Next to him, Hillman immediately said, "Linley, Mr. Fane has been waiting here for quite some time now. But when he saw that you were sculpting, he didn't want to disturb you. It truly looks as agile and real as a spirit." Fane sighed in amazement as he stared at the statue. The statue seemed to be alive, and for a moment, it was as though a real person was standing there. "Linley, who is this person that you sculpted?" Fane asked curiously. Linley didn't respond. "Fane, you came because..." Fane hurriedly said, "Oh, this time, I've come to invite you to make a trip to War God Mountain. Tomorrow, which is to say April 6th, all the various deities will be convening at War God Mountain, while a few saints have also been invited to attend." "Oh." Linley was suddenly intrigued. A gathering of deities, with only a few saints being invited? Clearly, this meeting was of great importance. "Might I ask what this is about?" Linley asked. Fane shook his head. "I'm not sure either, and Master didn't tell me. But if you go, you'll definitely find out." "All right. I'll definitely go tomorrow." Linley nodded as he spoke. Yulon Calendar, year 10,034, April 6th. The O'Brien Empire. Outside the imperial capital. On War God Mountain. Within the quiet, secluded courtyard of War God O'Brien, 4 deities, including the War God, the High Priest, Dylan, and Caesar, along with 4 saints, being Fane, Linley, Desri, and Tulili, all casually sat down. So only the 4 of us came. Desri also felt rather curious. Linley, do you know what is going on? Linley and Desri were engaging in a mental conversation. I'm not sure either. They are all deities. We shouldn't have anything to do with their affairs. Linley was puzzled as well. At this time, all 4 of the saints were maintaining their silence. The War God and the High Priest exchange a meaningful glance, and then the War God turned his razor-sharp gaze towards Linley and the other 3. In a sonorous voice, he said, "Today, the primary reason the 4 of you have been summoned is because the High Priest and I have come to an agreement. There are too many nations in the Yulan continent. It is time to reduce the number." Linley and the other 3 were shocked. Is the War God preparing to incite a major war? Linley wondered secretly to himself. The masked High Priest said in a gentle voice, "The War God and I have come to an agreement. There should only be 3 empires that will remain here in the Yulan continent, the O'Brien Empire, the Yulan Empire, and the Barak Empire. In other words, it is time to start a war that will cover the entire Yulan continent." Linley, Fane, Desri, and Tulili, although inwardly shocked, still managed to appear calm on the outside. "Linley, do you have any thoughts? You can be considered the representative of the Barak Empire." Linley paused for a moment. "This is good news. I naturally won't object." Linley immediately continued, "If our 3 major empires join forces, it won't be hard to destroy the other nations. Only, I trust that if you, War God, and you, High Priest, join forces, you can accomplish these things easily. Why have you invited us saints to come? I do not understand this." The War God and the High Priest might have simply wanted to give him face and invite him, but why did they invite Desri, Tulili, and Fane as well? It is very simple. The nearby Caesar had a playful, teasing look in his eyes. The War God and the High Priest don't want to act. They want you to act. The War God couldn't help but glance sideways at Caesar, but Caesar only snickered. "We won't get involved in this battle." The War God's firm, forceful voice rang out. "We have to tell you something. Per the orders of Lord Beirut, in 3 days' time, we 4 deities will all head towards the necropolis of the gods." To the necropolis of the gods. Linley, Desri, and the others all knew that last time, only the saints had entered the necropolis of the gods, while the deities had not entered it. What saints wanted to acquire was demigod divine sparks, while what the War God wanted was full god divine sparks. 3 days later? Why didn't Lord Beirut have you enter the necropolis of the gods along with us? Was there a special reason? Linley asked. The nearby Dylan snorted. No special reason. The only reason was because Lord Beirut so ordered it. Linley was amazed. Just because Lord Beirut had ordered it? Enough about that. The War God said calmly. Eliminating the other nations is only a small matter. I trust you 4 are completely capable of handling it. How about this, Linley, Tulili, Desri, you go lead your forces to the sacred Isle of the Radiant Church and destroy it. As for the personal disciples of my War Gods College, as well as the personal disciples of the High Priest, they'll go together to destroy the headquarters of the Cult of Shadows. The War God glanced sideways at Linley. Don't tell me you can't do it. I would be very much delighted to deal with the Radiant Church. Linley frowned as he spoke. But on the sacred Isle of the Radiant Church, there is a large-scale, powerful magical formation, the glory of the Radiant Sovereign. I imagine that just relying on saint-level power alone, we will find it very difficult to break through it. The nearby Dylan said disdainfully, the glory of the Radiant Sovereign? Yes, the power of that large magical formation isn't bad. Back then, it was able to block a blow from me. Just a single saint won't be able to break it. But Linley, if 10 of you saints attack it at full strength simultaneously, maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, but eventually, you'll be able to destroy the glory of the radiant sovereign. Linley laughed as well. Previously, the Radiant Church had also feared that Linley would lead a square of saints to attack the Sacred Isle. Thus, they had Linley sign the agreement that if he were to ever go to the Sacred Isle, he would go alone. But that agreement, ever since Linley, the Radiant Church, and the Cult of Shadows had their falling out, had been destroyed. The High Priest, Catherine, spoke. Actually, if 3 Wind-style Grand Mega Saints were to simultaneously cast the Dimensional Edge and attack the same location, that should be enough to break the glory of the Radiant Sovereign. If you can destroy the opponent's Saint-level combatants, the results of the battle will be a foregone conclusion, even before it starts. The War God said coldly. In this sort of nation-destroying war, when the time comes, directly utilize your Saint-level forces and threaten the opponents. I trust that this battle will be concluded very quickly. Linley, Desri, Fane, and Tulili could only laugh ruefully in their hearts. To deities, the battles of the Yulan continent were indeed nothing more than children's games, especially when the War God and the High Priest joined forces. And indeed, once the highest level experts of the Radiant Church and Cult of Shadows were destroyed, the results of the war would be plainly obvious to anyone. Lord War God, I am a bit confused. Linley spoke out. Why did you drag this out for so long instead of starting it long ago? I think that if you and the High Priest were to join forces, you would have been able to divide up the other 2 empires long ago and split the world up for yourselves. The War God and the High Priest glanced at each other. Dylan laughed wickedly. That's simple. At that time, I hadn't arrived at the Yulan continent, and Caesar hadn't made his breakthrough. In the human societies of the Yulan continent, the only deities were the 2 of them. The 2 of them were always opponents, how could they possibly join forces? As for why they are joining forces now, the first reason is because they both now have the feeling that unifying the Yulan continent under their rule is now hopeless, and so they have divided the world into 3 parts instead. The second reason is because they now feel pressured. As to why they feel pressured, go figure that out yourself. Dylan said. Linley suddenly had a thought. The War God and the High Priest feel that unifying the continent is now hopeless. Because of me. Linley instantly understood. First of all, he was about to become a deity. The War God and the High Priest should be aware of this. Secondly, he had acquired divine sparks within the necropolis of the gods, and was capable of cultivating a crop of demigods, and most importantly of all, thirdly, the relationship between Bibi and Beirut. These 3 points made it impossible for the War God or the High Priest to treat Linley as an enemy. The 18 northern duchies and the Holy Union will belong to my O'Brien Empire. The War God said calmly. The War God looked at Linley. The Rohalt Empire and the Great Plains of the Far East will belong to your Barak Empire. As for the remainder, the Dark Alliance and the Rhine Empire, they will belong to the Yulan Empire. The nearby High Priest nodded slightly. Linley, do you have any objections? The War God and the High Priest looked towards Linley. Linley could only laugh helplessly in his heart. From the words and attitude of the War God and the High Priest, he could completely sense that the War God and the High Priest didn't treat the upcoming war in the continent as a major affair at all. And indeed, this was a war without any possible alternate outcomes. Experts on their level didn't need to worry about it. No objections. Of course I have no objections. What else could Linley say? And so, according to this arrangement, the Yulan continent had been divided into 3 parts. Right. The War God nodded with satisfaction. Linley, you should know that actually, to the likes of us, worldly power is meaningless. The most important thing is your own level of training. Linley, I have heard that you will become a deity in around 10 years or so. Linley could tell that the war god's attitude towards him was now clearly one where he considered Linley as someone on the same level. After all, in but 10 short years, by the time the war god returned, Linley would most likely be a deity already. The nearby Dylan said solemnly, but before that happens, I have to remind you of a few things. Otherwise, if you were to make a foolish mistake, it would be terrible for you. Linley immediately listened carefully, and even the nearby Desri and the others paid close attention. Relying on your own power to become a deity and fusing with a divine spark to become a deity are completely different. Once your level of understanding of the laws has reached a certain level, the universe will naturally create a divine spark based on the nature of your soul, and this divine spark will completely be as one with your soul. Once your divine spark is created, you will face a choice. Dylan looked solemnly at Linley. After the divine spark is created, you have two options. The first is to absorb the divine spark into your mind and make it become one with your soul. At that time, your body will naturally transform into a divine body. The merging of your soul with the divine spark will cause your body to transform into a divine body. If that divine spark was of the earth element, then in the future, you would only be able to train in the elemental laws of the earth and be unable to train in any others. But of course, after the birth of the divine spark, there is still the second option. That option is to not absorb the divine spark into your body, and to instead, leave it outside. If you do so, then the universe will itself, according to the nature of the divine spark, generate a second body. Your original body won't change at all. In other words, you will essentially have a clone of yourself. This clone of yourself will be a demigod, while your original body will still be able to train in the other elemental laws. Dylan said seriously, however, there is a price for the second choice as well. Your soul will be divided into two. Now, during the process of becoming a deity, the strange energies of the universe will protect you during that instant, and thus your soul being split in half will be a controlled process, and you won't die from it. However, it will still be rather harmful to your soul. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 5, The Apocalypse War of 10,000 Years Ago. What the right choice is, only you can decide. Dylan said seriously. The choice people made upon the moment when they became deities by their own power would determine their future accomplishments and developments. Linley didn't have to think about it at all, his heart automatically inclined towards the second choice. He had walked on the path of understanding the wind and the earth, two different elements, this entire time. He truly would be unwilling to give up any one of those two elements. Lord Dylan, if one makes the second choice, for example, if I become a wind-style deity, then the moment I become a deity, if I put the divine spark outside my body, then the universe will naturally form a divine body around that divine spark, right? And my soul will be divided as well. In other words, there's no difference in the soul between the original and the clone, right? Right. Dylan nodded. Then I want to ask, if the clone becomes a deity, what about the original? Will it advance in power? Linley held this in great importance. If his clone became a deity, but his original body remained at the saint level, wouldn't that be a huge weakness? There is an increase in power, and your original body will be able to borrow divine power from your clone. Dylan shook his head as he spoke. But unfortunately, that's just borrowed divine power. Although you can borrow a great amount of it, since the original body has no divine spark, it will be much weaker than true divine power, due to the fact that there is no divine spark to merge with that divine power. The nearby Caesar laughed. Linley, you should know that some of the saints of the various religions can also sometimes borrow a bit of divine power. Linley nodded slightly. Caesar continued, you would be like them, except you'll only be able to borrow divine power from your divine clone. But of course, there's no need for you to offer tributes to yourself before borrowing a large amount of energy. However, without a compatible divine spark, the power will just be rather weaker. Understood? Linley nodded. The importance of a divine spark was something which Linley understood quite clearly. If the original body had no divine spark and only had divine power, it wouldn't be able to, for example, create a God realm. Although the original body will be weaker due to not having a divine spark, there are still ways to protect it. Because the clone and the original are actually one entity to begin with, therefore, you can reabsorb your clone into your original body. Dylan laughed and continued, and thus, you would still be able to utilize the strength of your divine clone. Linley secretly shook his head. Merge the divine clone with the original body? Utilize the power of the divine clone? In reality, that wasn't an increase in power at all. If you do that, although your power won't be increased, your original body will be protected better. Actually, the only real benefit of this second choice is, it will allow you to train in other elemental laws. The only real flaw, is that your soul will be divided in two. Dylan looked at Linley, saying seriously, Linley, a soul is the most important part of a creature. It is very difficult to strengthen and transform a soul. This sudden division in half means that your soul will be weakened by half. In terms of both training speed as well as ability to resist enemy attacks, the soul will be affected. I understand. You gain something, you lose something. How could there only be benefits and no disadvantages? Linley understood this. It is good that you know this. Dylan nodded. Linley's heart was filled with questions. What's going on with Dylan? Why has he explained to me all these details regarding becoming a deity? It isn't like Dylan, right? Linley felt that today, Dylan was acting rather differently. The war god, O'Brien, spoke out sonorously. Linley, remember what we discussed earlier. I'll hand over dealing with the Sacred Isle and the Radiant Church to you. Don't worry. Linley's eyes had a hard look flash through them. Destroy the Radiant Church? How many years had he been waiting? All right. Then you can leave now. The war god said calmly. Linley, Desri, Fane, and Tulili all immediately rose. Bowing respectfully, they left the war god's quiet, secluded residence. Atop the quiet war god mountain. Linley, congratulations. Today, Master and the others treated you with such friendliness that they clearly consider you to be one of them. Fane suddenly said. Linley was slightly startled. Right now, he could completely understand how bitter these other three experts had to feel in their hearts. Thousands of years of training, yet they still hadn't made any breakthroughs. Fane, I believe you three will quickly break through as well. Desri suddenly laughed and nodded. Right. We will break through soon. Fane, Tulili, have you already forgotten what Lord Beirut said? The three of us can break through in as quickly as a single day. The most important thing is that we have to have faith in ourselves. Right. We will break through. Tulili and Fane's eyes lit up and they nodded. If they could break through on their own, they wouldn't need a divine spark. But breaking through on one's own truly was difficult. Linley, when shall we head out to destroy the Radiant Church's Sacred Isle? Desri asked. Linley was silent for a moment, then said, how about this? It's best to address this quickly. Just thinking about destroying the Radiant Church made Linley feel his blood boil and made him feel alive. Let's all go back home today. Tomorrow, we'll summon our forces to make preparations. The day after that, on the 8th, the morning of the 8th, come to my Dragon Blood Castle, and we'll head out together to slaughter a path to the Sacred Isle. All right. We'll head out together on the 8th. Tulili and Desri both nodded. Fane began to laugh. Linley, you are moving so quickly. It seems I'll have to pick up the pace on my side as well and eliminate the cult of shadows more quickly. Haha, Fane, then we'll head off for now. Linley said. Linley, Desri, and Tulili immediately flew into the air, streaking towards the east. Linley's Dragon Blood Castle was in the northern part of the Barak Empire, while Desri lived in the southern part of the Barak Empire. As for Tulili, he lived in the Great Plains of the Far East. The three flew together for only a short while before breaking apart. Whoosh! A strong wind was blowing, causing his robe to flutter. Moving through the skies, soaring through the clouds and the mist, he flew at high speed towards Dragon Blood Castle. Linley, wait a moment. A sound suddenly rang out, and an indistinct blur appeared near Linley. A devilish young man, dressed in a dark gold robe, was standing before Linley. In his forehead, there was a single slit, like a knife scar. It was the deity-level expert, Delin. Lord Delin. Linley was somewhat surprised. Delin, surrounded by a devilish aura, had a rather sincere smile on his face right now. Linley, your flying speed is quite fast. It seems you have indeed progressed significantly due to your time in the necropolis of the gods. Linley felt utterly confused. Flying fast? On the road back to Dragon Blood Castle, he was only flying at regular speed, and didn't even fly at full speed. Why would Delin say he was flying fast? This Delin, why is he praising me for no reason? Linley instantly could guess that Delin probably had something to discuss with him. Lord Delin. Is there something you need? Linley directly broached the subject. Delin took a deep breath. Linley, to be honest, Delin, was born tens of thousands of years ago, and experienced the terrible apocalypse war of 10,000 years ago, as well as the war of the gods, the Theomachy, of 5,000 years ago. I've been protecting my 5 children this entire time, but unfortunately, 5,000 years ago, my children and I were imprisoned into the Gabados planar prison. Hearing this, Linley felt deeply stunned. 5,000 years ago, experts from other planes descended. I knew about this. But what is this apocalypse war of 10,000 years ago? Linley had never heard that 10,000 years ago, there was an apocalypse war. From what Delin was saying, it seemed as though the war of 10,000 years ago was even more terrifying than the one 5,000 years ago. Delin, seeing the look on Linley's face, understood. You are curious about the apocalypse war? Delin laughed. He had a favor to ask, and thus he was very happy to have the chance to tell these secrets to Linley. Linley nodded. The apocalypse war was on a far larger scale than the war of 5,000 years ago. In truth, in the past, this plane had 5 continents. Delin explained in detail. 5 continents. Linley had never heard of this before. In addition, the history books had never mentioned the existence of other continents. Delin explained in detail, there was a vast distance between each continent, and the Yulon continent is the northernmost continent of the 5. The other 4 continents were all in the South Seas. Because there is a distance of nearly 10 million kilometers between the continents, back then, ordinary people didn't know about the other continents' existence. During that apocalypse war, Delin sighed. That was a true, large-scale war, an utterly destructive, apocalyptic war. The waves of the ocean rose to the heavens, and space itself was ripped apart. Even the shock waves of the battles occurring in the depths of the sea impacted the other continents. The 4 southernmost continents were all shattered and destroyed, and one deity after another fell. The scale of this war was far, far greater than the one from 5,000 years ago. Linley's heart quailed. The battle had been so vicious that 4 continents had collapsed. What level of experts had fought in this war? And it was also due to that battle that Lord Beirut formally assumed control over the Yulon continent. Delin sighed. Linley, at that time, although I was already a demigod, I could only hide here on the Yulon continent, not daring to participate in the battle at all. Linley could completely imagine that scene. I heard that the divine sparks and deity corpses of the necropolis of the gods came from that apocalypse war. Delin sighed. But of course, that's just what I hear. I don't have any proof. Linley nodded slightly. Dylan had been hiding, after all, and didn't take part in the battle. 5,000 years ago, my children and I were jailed into the Gabados planar prison. That place was an utter nightmare, Dylan said in a low voice. My 5 children, 2 of them died there. Fortunately, we escaped back to the Yulon continent afterwards. To this very day, Dylan hadn't told Linley that it was Linley who had allowed him to escape. But this time, yet another one of my children have died. Dylan's eyes contained irrepressible grief. It truly is too hard to become a deity. My children are only 6-eyed golden Ni lions, after all. It will be hard for them to break through their natural limitations and become deities. Perhaps Desri and Fane will be able to break through upon receiving some insight, but magical beasts, it is far harder for us to break through than humans. Therefore, I, Dylan, would like to ask you, Linley, to give me one of your divine sparks. Dylan looked at Linley sincerely. Linley understood what Dylan was thinking. Of course, I won't let you suffer too much of a loss. Only, I definitely don't have a treasure as valuable as a divine spark, but I do have divine artifacts. I can trade divine artifacts for it. How about 3 divine artifacts? Or perhaps, I can give you my own personal set of divine artifact gloves. Dylan said hurriedly. Dylan deeply loved his children. This was apparent from the efforts he had gone to in the Gabados planar prison to protect them. Originally, he had forbidden them from going to the necropolis of the gods, but Cleo and the other brothers all desired to become deities. In the end, Dylan couldn't stop them, but on this trip to the necropolis of the gods, one of them had died. Now that Linley had 3 divine sparks, Dylan had decided to thicken his skin and come ask him for one. Divine sparks were far more important than divine artifacts. 4 divine artifacts for a divine spark, Linley was actually still trading at a loss. What was the chance for a saint to successfully navigate the 11th floor? It was incredibly low. Linley's success allowed him to obtain these 3 divine sparks, but in the future, Linley probably wouldn't have this sort of opportunity again. All right. I agree. Linley nodded. Dylan couldn't help but feel ecstatic. Dylan immediately retrieved 3 divine artifacts with a flip of his hand. All of them were blade weapon type divine artifacts. At the same time, in Dylan's hands appeared a dark gold divine artifact gloves. In terms of preciousness, it was still the divine artifact gloves which was the most precious. Here is the divine spark. With a flip of his hand, Linley retrieved the destruction type divine spark. Linley had made this decision on behalf of the 6-eyed golden Ni lions. After all, they themselves trained in the way of destruction. Seeing the divine spark, Dylan couldn't help but feel his heart quiver. This was a divine spark. If he himself wanted to enter the necropolis of the gods, he would have to start from the 12th floor. It would be extremely hard to procure a divine spark, even for him. Thank you, thank you. Despite his normal, terrible temper, Dylan right now felt so excited that he said thank you twice in a row. Wait a moment. I'll dissolve the ownership bond one have with the divine artifact gloves. Lord Dylan, I don't need these divine artifacts. Linley said. He didn't lack for blade divine artifacts. 2 or 3 extra made no difference. As for divine artifact gloves, Linley himself was a sword user, and so they wouldn't be very useful to him anyways. What? You don't need them? Dylan was stunned. I don't need them. Linley smiled and nodded. Lord Dylan, I only hope that if in the future, I need your assistance, Lord Dylan, that you can help me. That would be wonderful. In his heart, Dylan actually was quite unwilling to part with these divine artifact gloves, but Dylan was a very arrogant, prideful person. If he were to receive a divine spark from Linley without giving Linley anything good for them, he himself would feel uneasy. Dylan couldn't help but feel rather frantic. How can this be acceptable? Unacceptable. Seeing Linley, Dylan felt very guilty, as though he owed him a great debt. What could he do to recompense Linley? Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 6, Slaughtering a Path to the Sacred Isle. This definitely is not acceptable. If you are going to act like this, then Dylan wanted to say I will be unable to accept this divine spark. But this divine spark was simply too important to Dylan. Lord Dylan, don't mind it too much. You should know that I am going to become a deity on my own, and so I think you will need it more than I do. Linley quickly changed the topic. Lord Dylan, I have to get going. Seeing Linley was about to leave, Dylan couldn't help but reach out to stop him. Linley, I truly don't have any other treasures I can bring out. Dylan looked at Linley, more serious than ever before. But Linley, I will remember the kindness you have shown me on this day. If in the future there is anything you need, Dylan, definitely won't say a single word in complaint. Linley smiled. Then Lord Dylan, let's part ways here. Linley returned to Dragonblood Castle, and informed Delia, Warden, and the others of the decision of the War God and the High Priest. Warden, the Barker brothers, and Zisler, upon hearing this news, were extremely excited. Both the Barker brothers and Zisler had their own major scores to settle with the Radiant Church. This entire time, Warden, as well, wanted to help Linley in his quest for revenge. In the past, he wasn't strong enough, but now, Warden had reached the saint level as well, and once he transformed into a Dragonblood warrior saint, he was extremely powerful, on par with Gates and the others. Nighttime. A crescent moon hung in the sky. Linley left his bed, putting on a long robe and heading to the balcony, staring at the endless night. Tomorrow, the Radiant Church and I will have our final battle. Linley couldn't fall asleep tonight, no matter how he tried. For some reason, those scenes from his childhood years kept on flashing through his mind. Whenever he thought about the fact that tomorrow, he was going to deal with the Radiant Church, and that he was about to accomplish the goal he had been striving towards for so long, he would grow excited. Linley. Delia walked next to Linley as well. Are you thinking about the attack on the Radiant Church tomorrow? Delia was going alongside Linley tomorrow. Although Delia hadn't completely fused with the divine spark, Delia was still a grand mega saint of the wind style now. In addition, even her incomplete god realm could still be effective in certain circumstances. Right. Tomorrow is a day for which I have waited a long time. Linley's heart was surging with emotion. Sadly, Grandpa Douring won't be able to see it. If your Grandpa Douring was still alive, he would definitely be so proud of you. Delia consoled him. Delia knew about Douring Coward as well. Mother died. Father died. Even Grandpa Douring, who took care of me the entire time, died. Linley stared towards the west. All thanks to the Radiant Church. Self-proclaimed to be radiant. Self-proclaimed to love the world. The Radiant Church. They destroyed everything. Linley shook his head and sneered. While I was nothing more than one of the countless families they had destroyed. Barker and his brothers, Rebecca and her sister, their families were all wiped out as well. It was the Radiant Church who did it. Linley's rage was beginning to build. Linley, don't think too much about these things. Tomorrow, everything will come to an end. Delia consoled him. Delia knew very well, that if it hadn't been because of the amount of hatred he had felt, how could Linley have forced himself to endure so much, and at the tender age of 18, enter the endless, uninhabited mountain range of magical beasts for 3 full years, and then train in another little village for 5. Right. Tomorrow, it will all come to an end. Linley raised his head to look at the night sky. For a moment, it seemed, his father, his Grandpa Douring, and that vague, blurry memory of his mother were there in the night sky, watching him. April 8th dawn. The morning sun shone down upon Dragonblood Castle. Gruel. A deep growl. An enormous, sinuous draconic form seemed to coil about near Dragonblood Castle, but the soldiers of Dragonblood Castle weren't startled at all. Many of them already knew that there were 3 saint-level dragons living within Dragonblood Castle. Occasionally, the dragon saints would head out, while occasionally they would come back. This was also the reason why there was an urban legend that Dragonblood Castle had enormous dragons in the vicinity. Within the spacious training fields of Dragonblood Castle, Linley's experts had arrived long ago. On this trip to the Sacred Isle, Linley's side included Linley, Bibi, Delia, Wharton, the 5 Barker brothers, Zisler, and the 3 saint-level dragons. In total, 13. As for Dragonblood Castle, Haru would be left on guard. Every single individual heading out on this expedition was a peak stage saint, none of them weaker than Haydn's in power. They haven't arrived yet. Wharton was getting rather impatient. Right now, there was a large group of people waiting to send them off as well. One of them was Hillman, who laughed and said, "Wharton, don't be impatient. It is still early. The Great Plains of the Far East are especially far away from us, at least 10,000 kilometers distant. Even flying will take a long time. Desri's group will probably arrive a bit earlier, but Tulili and the others will need a long period of time. Don't be impatient. Everyone, just keep waiting a while longer." Linley spoke out. But although he counseled patience, Linley himself still couldn't help but continuously stare towards the skies. He had waited far too long for this day. "Big bro, I think you are even more impatient than I am," Wharton said with a laugh. Linley could only laugh in response. "Wow, they are here." Bibi, standing on Linley's shoulders, suddenly let out a surprised, delighted cry. Linley's group quickly discovered that in the distant horizon, indistinct human figures were flying towards them at high speed. One of them, a fast-moving flashing white streak of light, was especially noticeable, and Linley immediately recognized the person. It was Desri. HRM. Linley was suddenly surprised. From the distant horizon, there were more than 10 people flying over. Aside from Desri, Penslin, Higginson, Miller, Ford, and Livingston, there were 6 others coming as well. The other 6 people were led by Tulili. Tulili and his disciples have arrived as well. Although Linley was puzzled by the question of how Tulili, who lived over 10,000 kilometers away, had managed to arrive so soon, he was still extremely delighted. Everyone was here. That meant they could head out soon. Desri and Tulili's groups landed together within Dragonblood Castle. Tulili walked forward, a rare hint of a smile on his face. "Linley, we aren't late, right?" "Not late at all. Only, why is it that you are alongside Desri's group? Did you coincidentally meet on the way over? Especially since you live in the Great Plains of the Far East." Before Linley even finished his words, the nearby Desri laughed and responded, "Linley, Tulili led his disciples to my place yesterday, which is why this morning, we headed out together." Linley now understood. "I was afraid of coming late and making your 2 sides impatient. That wouldn't be good." Tulili laughed. "Desri and I haven't had a proper get-together in quite some time anyhow, so I stayed a night at his place. Everyone's present. Enough chit-chat, then. Let's head out," Bibi said. Linley, Desri, and Tulili exchanged glances, then began to laugh. Linley nodded, then said loudly, "Good, then let's head out immediately." Linley stared towards the western horizon, his eyes shining. "Our destination, the Radiant Church's Sacred Isle. Yulon Continent, year 10,034, April 8. With Linley, Desri, and Tulili as the leaders, a total of 25 saints flew valiantly out of Dragonblood Castle, piercing through the clouds in the sky, heading directly west. The guards of Dragonblood Castle all sighed in astonishment as they watched this scene. 25 saints flying together at the same time. When had ordinary people ever seen such an incredible sight? Within a large ship that was sailing with haste towards the sacred isle of the Radiant Church. The waves struck against the beaches as that ship finally came to a halt at the sacred isle's harbor. In front of the harbor, the violet-robed special executors of the ecclesiastical tribunal were staring coldly at the ship. The high-level executor who was in charge of escorting this ship was the first to disembark. "How many did you ship over?" the leader of the special executors said coldly. The disembarked executor said respectfully, "My lord, this time we have shipped over 800. The special executor nodded slightly. "Quick, bring them all over. First wash them, and give them some clean clothes." "Yes." Immediately, one dirty slave after another was brought out by the executors. "Radiant Church, radiant. As radiant as dog shit." A slave roared furiously from amidst the others in the ground, but immediately following his shout was a crack of a whip. "If you have the ability to do so, then kill me. I was blind for having believed that this was a pilgrimage." The slave roared loudly in a hoarse voice. "My wife, my daughter? Did you bring them all here as well? And you claim this is a pilgrimage? I really am blind, A blade had flashed, and a large hole had appeared in the slave's mouth as a piece of his tongue came falling off. "What's this all about?" the special executor barked to the whip-wielding low-level executor. "My lord, I don't know either." The low-level executor was terrified. While shipping them over, these stubborn ones were disciplined long ago. "I didn't expect that this fellow had been biding his time." The slave whose tongue had been cut off stared hatefully at these executors. Most of the other slaves had felt resigned to their fate long ago. They walked forward numbly. Within a wide tunnel, Haydns, dressed in a white robe, was standing in front of a beautiful female priestess, dressed in white. At this time, a large number of washed slaves, now dressed in clean clothes, were being escorted through this dark tunnel to the other end. That slave whose tongue had been chopped off had also been washed and given a fresh change of clothes. He stared at Haydns, and instantly, his terrified eyes turned round. In the Holy Union, Haydns had presided over large-scale masses before, and in the past, this slave had personally seen Haydns and knew that Haydns was the Holy Emperor of the Radiant Church. Instantly, he began to make furious sounds towards Haydns. "Hurry up!" Instantly, one of the escorts behind him gave him a vicious lash of the whip, causing the slave's body to spasm from the blow. Such utter fools! They should feel proud to be able to offer their lives to the mighty Lord Chiquita Chijita. The female priestess behind Haydns said with a cold snort. Haydns laughed calmly. "How many souls does Lord Chiquita still need before he will have completely recovered?" Haydns asked the white-robed priestess. The priestess said respectfully, "Your Holiness, in the past year, we have already delivered several tens of thousands of people. Lord Chiquita has already recovered most of his strength, but according to what Lord Chiquita says, to completely recover, he will most likely need 10,000 more common souls." 10,000 more common souls? That will still take a long time. Haydns frowned. But of course, 10 saint-level souls would be sufficient. The white-robed priestess said. Haydns frowned, casting a glance at the white-robed priestess. Saint-level souls? Remember, all you need to do is take good care of Lord Chiquita. Don't get involved in anything else. Yes. The white-robed priestess said respectfully. Haydns glanced towards the other end of the tunnel, then at the freshly washed slaves who were still being escorted in an unbroken stream through it. He sighed secretly. Before draining their souls, he wants the slaves to be washed and changed into clean clothes. This Chiquita, ugh. Haydns actually felt some aversion towards this Chiquita. But Haydns knew exactly how terrifyingly powerful Chiquita was. Ever since the event which happened in the anarchic lands, where he had torn up the agreement with Linley and had their final falling out, Haydns had begun to carefully plan for what he would have to do in the event that Linley led a group of saints to slaughter a path to the sacred isle. Fortunately, the radiant sovereign is munificent. At this moment of crisis, he permitted Lord Chiquita to descend. Haydns murmured to himself. But what Haydns didn't know was that right now, Linley was currently leading a group of 25 experts who were traversing through the ocean, flying at high speed to the sacred isle. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 7, Judgment Day descends. From far off in the distance, the radiant church's sacred isle seemed so peaceful. A group of shadows was flying towards it at high speed from the horizon. Hold! Linley's voice rang out in everyone's mind, and instantly, all of the experts came to a halt at a distance of a few kilometers away from the sacred isle. The enormous draconic bodies of the tyrant Wyrm, the thunder lizard, and the gold dragon swayed slightly in the air. The three leaders, Linley, Tulili, and Desri, stared down at the distant island. That's the sacred isle. No mistaking it? Tulili nodded. Linley's group could feel that enormous light-style aura. It felt the same as Fenley City had in the past. First let myself and Delia give them a greeting gift. After having suppressed his hatred for so long, Linley's heart was now filled with rage. A greeting gift. Tulili, Desri, and the other experts all looked at Linley and Delia. Delia and Linley, wife and husband, exchanged a glance. They had already discussed this affair of attacking the sacred isle late into the previous night. Delia immediately began to murmur the words to a magic spell, while Linley did so as well. Wind-style forbidden level magic. The experts were all eagerly awaiting this spectacle. Delia's eyes suddenly lit up, and her jade-like arms pointed towards the distant sacred isle. Rumble! Suddenly, a massive storm that was dozens of kilometers wide appeared out of nowhere. Everywhere within line of sight was filled with blasts of wind which either formed into twisting tornadoes or powerful, knife-like gusts of wind. The ocean itself was beginning to stir. The waves of the ocean quickly reached a height of hundreds of meters, and with a rumbling sound, the massive tidal waves crashed down towards the sacred isle like waves of soldiers. When they reached the sacred isle, those tidal waves came crashing down viciously like mountains. Bang! Under the attack of the tidal waves that were hundreds of meters high, those stone houses immediately shattered from the impact, and many boulders and trees were smashed to smithereens as well. Many of the radiant church's forces were directly smashed into a pulp. This blowing wind was actually acting like countless cutting blades. This was wind-style forbidden level magic, annihilating tempest. Wherever the annihilating tempest passed by, not a single shred of grass would be able to survive. This wasn't that sort of ordinary, natural tempest. This was the annihilating tempest, formed from countless wind blades of all sizes. Even boulders and trees were effortlessly sliced into rubble by the countless wind blades. A white radiant aura, centered around the 9th floor of the radiant temple, shot out in every direction. A visible white barrier was quickly expanding, and every place covered by this white barrier was protected against and blocked off from the energy of the annihilating tempest. What's going on? Who is attacking? The leader of the zealots, Lehman, grabbed a vicar and growled at him. Don't know, I don't know. The white-robed vicar seemed to have been scared silly by the power of the annihilating tempest. Just then, he had personally witnessed how those people in the distance had been sliced through by the countless wind blades of the annihilating tempest and turned into a pile of ground meat. And just at this moment, rumble, the entire sacred isle was beginning to shake. After having experienced the annihilating tempest, the lucky survivors of the sacred isle only numbered 10% of their former numbers. These lucky survivors were all experts of the 7th or 8th ranks. But against a forbidden level spell. These experts were also utterly terrified. What is going on with the ground? Many of the followers of the church, their bodies soaked through and through by those earlier waves, felt the ground beneath their feet was unsteady. Crunch. Boom. The earth was constantly shaking. It was as though a series of ripples was expanding in every direction. These vibrations were causing the earth itself to break apart, and one massive crack in the earth appeared after another. Many experts, screaming, fell directly into those massive cracks, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was in the skies. Countless massive boulders, covered with an earthen light, were crashing down wildly from the heavens. Bang! Many of the members of the church who were struck by these boulders were instantly turned into meat pulp. Lord! Some hopeless believers raised their head and shouted, hoping that the Lord would save them. And then, they were smashed flat by the massive descending boulders, and their blood stained the ground an eye-catching color. But soon, their blood was washed away by the water which was appearing from the cracks in the earth, and many half-smashed bodies were now floating about. Bastard! Lehman smashed forth with a fist viciously, breaking an enormous boulder above him into tiny pieces. But he wasn't able to save any others. Who just used the Earth-style forbidden level spell, heaven collapses, earth shatters. Lehman was howling in his mind. Earth-style, forbidden level spell, heaven collapses, earth shatters. Over 2/3 of the ground of the sacred isle had sank down, with only the central third area where the radiant temple itself was located remaining. And yet, even this remaining third still had many large cracks in the ground. The radius of the protective barrier of the radiant temple retracted once again. They were afraid that the enemies would use yet another forbidden level spell, and yes, their fears were correct. This was nothing more than the appetizers. The faces of those very few lucky survivors suddenly changed, because suddenly, the large amounts of seawater around the sacred isle had suddenly frozen, and the cracked earth of the sacred isle suddenly was covered with a layer of ice. Frost had completely covered the entire area. Boom! The areas that were not under the direct protection of that barrier of the radiant temple were immediately frozen, then shattered. Countless boulders and mounds of dirt all shattered into tiny pieces, and then fell into the sea. But the freezing, then shattering of these boulders was just a side effect. More importantly, due to the shrunken radius of the protective barrier of the radiant temple, many followers of the church had been suddenly exposed, and they, too, were frozen, then shattered into tiny pieces. Water style, forbidden level spell, absolute zero. Your Holiness, what should we do? What should we do? A nearby cardinal was standing next to Haydn's in terror and fear. Haydn's was standing on the 9th floor of the radiant temple, staring at what was happening from a distance. The most terrifying enemy of our church, Haydn's face was ugly to behold. Has come. Don't bother about the other areas. First, protect the radiant temple. Suddenly, Haydn's face changed. What? Seeing what had happened through the window, Haydn's was shocked as well. After having suffered the absolute zero attack, the sacred isle only had 20% of its original territory left. The radiant temple's barrier was currently only protecting a few kilometers worth of space in the heart now. Suddenly, a white light, like the rays of the sun, shone down on the tattered remnants of the island. The island, illuminated by that holy light, suddenly seemed to be much brighter, but then, everything that white light touched was transformed into dust, the people included. Light style, forbidden level magic, world purifying light. After taking 4 forbidden level spells in a row, the originally beautiful, graceful sacred island was now reduced to just the few square kilometers on which the radiant temple sat. When you two couples work together, you really are quite terrifying. In mid-air, Tulali sighed in amazement. That was awesome. Bibi's excited little eyes were gleaming. Just then, after Linley and Delia had cast their 2 major forbidden level spells, Pencilin and Desri had cast 2 major forbidden level spells of their own. Earth style, wind style, water style, light style, 4 forbidden level spells had struck out in sequence. Even if the Radiant Church had wanted to protect the entire island, there was no way it could have done so. Right now, Linley's eyes, sharp as daggers, were staring at the distant radiant temple. That was just the greeting gift. Come. Let's start the battle. Linley led the way, flying towards the radiant temple, and the rest of the 25 saints flew alongside him. All the high-level members of the radiant temple were clustered here on the 9th floor. Through the massive window wall, they could clearly make out those 25 experts flying towards them. Seeing this, their hearts all shuddered, but their leader, Haydn's, was silent. That's Linley. Linley has come. And Desri. That traitor to the church, Desri, who left long ago. He is so shameless to come back now. Everyone, what should we do? Everyone was frantic. HRMPH, a cold snort rang out, and instantly, all of the high-level members of the church on the 9th floor quieted down. The Holy Emperor Haydn's, who in the past had always been amiable and smiling, never revealing his rage even when utterly infuriated, was no longer hiding anything. Lehman. Fallen leaf. Haydn's heavy voice shook the entire radiant temple, and even the area outside of it rang with his voice. Two blurs appeared in the middle of the 9th floor of the radiant temple. It was the leader of the zealots, Lehman, and the spiritual leader of the ascetics, Lord Fallen Leaf. Lehman, we'll be relying on you this time. Haydn's looked at Lehman. The great 6-point battle formation. This is the most powerful attack of our church. The emaciated Fallen Leaf looked at Lehman as well. This time, we cannot afford to lose. Lehman's chiseled, granite features appeared very cold. Please don't worry. We have 15 saint-level 4-winged angels, 10 saint-level zealots, 6 saint-level ascetics, and 4 saint-level special executors. Including me, we have a total of 36, we can form the great 6-point battle formation. Linley's group will definitely die. Haydn's nodded slightly. Only by including Lehman would they be able to reach the necessary number of 36 saints. Many of them were only early stage and middle stage saints. The total strength of the church, as well as our future prospects, are all at stake here. In his heart, Haydn's felt nervous. The church had staked all of its saint-level power on this battle. The radius of the protective barrier coming from the radiant temple was rapidly shrinking, until finally retreating to a radius of just a few hundred meters around the radiant temple itself. Dozens of figures emerged from within the radiant temple, with Haydn's and Lord Fallen Leaf leading them. Haydn's and Lord Fallen Leaf were both dressed in white robes, while Haydn's was wielding a magi staff in his hands, and his bald head was gleaming with light. Haydn's, you actually dare to come out? Wharton growled coldly. Why shouldn't I dare? Haydn's face was cold. He turned to look at Linley, with the demeanor of a high and mighty celestial spirit. Linley, do you know that by acting in such a way, you are committing a great blasphemy against the Radiant Sovereign? This desire of yours to destroy the legacy of the Radiant Sovereign in the mortal world is an unpardonable sin. Haydn's, do you think I am one of your followers, to be fooled by you? Linley let out a cold laugh. The Radiant Sovereign is an exalted sovereign. His glorious light is spread across countless planes. How can the sovereign possibly be bothered if just one or two of them have problems? What's more, this is just a material plane which cannot possibly accommodate the mighty presence of a sovereign. Linley, don't waste words with them. Let's just kill them. Tulali said. In the necropolis of the gods, Linley had been terror-stricken many times, but even there, he had never been as excited as he currently felt. Haydn's, that year, when I left the city of Hesse, I swore that I would definitely destroy your entire radiant church and pull it out by the roots. Now, today, Linley looked calmly at Haydn's. Today is the day your radiant church is annihilated. Haydn's looked at Linley, secretly hating himself. In the past, after I found out that Linley knew about what happened to his mother, I shouldn't have tried to have him become a blessed one. I should have killed him early on. At the same time, Haydn spoke mentally to Lehman. Lehman, make your move. The many saints behind Haydn suddenly began to move at high speed. These 36 saints were clearly preparing to set up the great six-point battle formation. Ah! Suddenly, an agonized scream rang out. One of Haydn's saints fell from the sky, his head crushed into smithereens. What do you think you are doing, Ed? BB waved his little paws, snickering as he stared at Haydn's. Haydn stared at BB, feeling as though BB's smile was incomparably detestable. Bastard! No matter how well trained he was, Haydn's couldn't help but let out a curse. The great six-point battle formation was now missing a person. What to do? Haydn's could only glance at the nearby Lord Fallen Leaf, and mentally spoke to him, Fallen Leaf, you go, but just as he began to mentally speak, Haydn's noticed a look of shock appear in the eyes of Fallen Leaf. Haydn's frantically turned his head back. A devilish violet flash of light had already arrived next to him, and where the violet sword passed through, space itself was torn apart. Linley. Haydn stared in shocked into Linley's cold eyes. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 8, The Great Six-Point Battle Formation. A holy light suddenly sprang forth from Haydn's body, and Linley's blood-violet sword instantly began to move more slowly, as though it was mired in mud. At the same time, the wellspring of this holy light, the radiant scriptures, flew out from within Haydn's body, hovering above Haydn's head. Die! Linley's face was cold and cruel. Although blood-violet's speed had been lessened and impacted, it still wasn't slow enough for the likes of Haydn's to dodge. No. Haydn's frantically tried to dodge. Slash. Blood-violet chopped down diagonally from Haydn's shoulder, and half of Haydn's body, including both of his legs, was chopped apart. That half of his body included his right arm, which had been holding his magi staff. With this chop, even the magi staff tumbled down. Ugh! A suppressed, agonized cry escaped Haydn's lips. But then, Haydn's remaining half of his body flew back at high speed, while the radiant scriptures hovering over his head radiated a holy white light that quickly began to repair Haydn's wounds. His body was visibly regenerating. Actually, Haydn's himself was very talented at light-style healing magic, but with this divine artifact, the radiant scriptures, his healing speed was even faster. Haydn's, I didn't expect you to be able to survive even that. But it's for the better, I'll let you personally witness the true destruction of the Radiant Church. Linley said with complete confidence. After his experiences in the necropolis of the gods, he now possessed the pearl of life and gained insights into the profound truths of velocity. Linley was now far stronger than he had been before entering the necropolis of the gods, and he didn't hold the experts of the Radiant Church in front of him in any regard at all. Prepare to die, Linley. Lehman rumbled in his thick voice. Including Lehman and Lord Fallen Leaf, 36 saint-level experts had suddenly moved outwards, surrounding Linley's group. How laughable! You fellows didn't try to flee. Lehman, in mid-air, laughed coldly. Linley, Tulili, Desri, and the others began to laugh as well. How could they not have noticed that the experts of the Radiant Church were surrounding them? Perhaps they were about to set up some sort of new, special battle formation, but Linley's group understood a simple principle: no matter how powerful a battle formation is, it is still only as powerful as the people who use it. Tulili laughed coldly. These saints, most of them are early-stage saints. More importantly, your formation doesn't just surround one of us. It surrounds 25 of us. The combined attacks of we 25 saints, I wonder if your formation would be able to hold on. Whoosh! Haydn's had already rapidly retreated to the door of the Radiant Temple. He raised his head, staring upwards into mid-air. Seeing that Linley's group had been trapped within the great six-point battle formation, he couldn't help but feel wildly overjoyed, and he said in a loud voice, Linley, you and your group came to die. Lehman, hurry up and kill them. Just then, he had nearly lost his life. Haydn's heart was currently swelling with a murderous intent, but he himself wasn't powerful enough to take action. "Yes, Your Holiness." Lehman was extremely confident as well. Haydn's took a deep breath, then started watching, slightly nervous. Although he was extremely confident in the power of the great six-point battle formation, the enemy he was facing was Linley, a person who created miracles. Linley was currently carefully examining this so-called great six-point battle formation before him. In but a glance, Linley could tell that this great six-point battle formation should be the advanced version of the angel battle formation, which was formed from 6 experts. This great six-point battle formation, however, had 36 saints divided into 6 parts. Each of the 6 saints in each part formed an angel battle formation. The 36 of them then formed a single whole, as the 6 angel battle formations once again merged with each other, forming this so-called great six-point battle formation. Could it be that they don't know that the angel battle formation means nothing to me? Could it be that they think I would be stopped by a powered-up angel battle formation? Linley was extremely confident. The 4-winged angels, the wild saint-level zealots, the cold, merciless saint-level special executors, the 36 saints were formed into a single whole, and terrifyingly powerful holy force was constantly flowing through them. Amongst them, the director of this formation, Lehman, clearly had the most powerful holy force. Arg. 2.5 meters tall, and as massive and burly as a magical beast, Lehman let out a furious roar, brandishing that long staff of his, covered in holy light. Bang! The long staff struck down from far away. Instantly, a ray of holy energy that was dozens of meters long and as thick as a barrel blasted down from the staff. The holy energy's main target was Linley, but with a single movement, Linley dodged away from it when the beam of holy energy was still a meter away from him. Linley was simply too fast. "Everyone, don't try to take that beam of light on by yourself." Linley's voice rang out in Delia, Desri, Tulali, and the other experts' minds. Although he hadn't touched the beam of light, even at the distance of 1 meter, Linley had sensed that his pulse guard defense was faintly trembling. After having been reinforced by the merged power of 36 saints, this attack was definitely comparable to a combination attack of 100 saints. Boom! 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 One pillar of light blasted out after another, but after the beam of light dissipated, the holy energy actually returned to the formation. If this continues, their power will be virtually limitless. Linley said to himself. "Haha, everyone, attack together." Tulali shouted loudly, and then a blood-red blade flashed through the sky. Ruoor! The tyrant Wyrm, the thunder lizard, and the gold dragon swept out with their draconic tails, smashing viciously towards the enemies. Die! Barker and his brothers, who had been nursing their grief and hatred this entire time, had all transformed into undying warrior saints. With a furious roar, the 5 brothers all brandished those astonishing Gree attacks, smashing directly down towards the great six-point battle formation with mountain-splitting force. As for Zisler, he had summoned 8 saint-level undead. Zisler's eyes were flashing non-stop with jade-green light. Linley, Wharton, Beebe, Miller, Livingston, Ford, Higginson, and the other saints all attacked the formation at the same time as well. With the saint-level undead added in, their side had over 30 peak stage saints. Bang! 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 Rips in space appeared and disappeared like an electric snake was tearing through the sky, but that white light endured and continued. The wild attacks caused the entire formation to vibrate wildly, but in the end, it still managed to stabilize. The faces of a few of those 36 saints had turned somewhat pale, but as the holy light flooded through their bodies, they quickly recovered. "Whew! It's fine." The distant Haydns felt a surge of joy. "We held on. We really held on." Haydns had worried that this great six-point battle formation wouldn't be able to hold on in the face of so many experts attacking together. Linley, you will definitely die. Haydns finally felt confident. If even Linley, when joining forces with all the other experts, wasn't able to break through, what did they have to be afraid of? After all, the energy of the attacks of this great six-point battle formation which were aimed at the inside of the formation would return to the formation, making the available energy virtually limitless. No matter how long this fight lasted for, the Radiant Church wouldn't be afraid. Haha, Lord Lehman laughed loudly in his thick, rumbling voice. The Radiant Church's side all had excited smiles on their faces. The power of this formation is quite something. Linley sighed in praise. Right. It really is powerful. Our full power attacks were quickly depleted by the energy of this formation, abrading the great majority of the strength of the attacks. Only 10 or 20% of our power managed to get through and land on the bodies of those 36. Desri sighed in praise as well. The power of their combined attacks, even reduced to 10 or 20%, was still enough to cause some of those weaker 36 saints to be injured. The difference in power between the two sides was simply too great. Only, the duplicative merged power of this formation was simply too great, and it also possessed the healing properties of light-style energy. Desri, watch me. With a flip of his hand, Linley withdrew his adamantine heavy sword. Linley swept Lehman and Fallen Leaf with his gaze. He praised, I have to admit, this formation your Radiant Church possesses truly does have incredible defense. However, could it be that you aren't aware that this sort of formation is useless against me? Whoosh. With a flash, Linley charged towards Lehman's side. Die. Linley's eyes were filled with fierceness. The adamantine heavy sword in his hand struck out gently, like a falling leaf, but its speed was actually as fast and vicious as a bolt of lightning. In an instant, it landed against the white glow, and a terrifying vibrational force passed straight through it, virtually ignoring it as it attacked Lehman. Profound truths of the earth, throbbing pulse of the world, 64 fused waves. Huh. Linley suddenly frowned. Linley could clearly sense that the vibrational waves, upon reaching Lehman's arm, instantly made it explode, but the holy energy immediately began to visibly repair the damage done at high speed. Not good. Linley instantly understood the difference between this great six-point battle formation and the angel battle formation. The 6 parts of the angel battle formation were represented by 6 people. If Linley were to attack one part of the angel battle formation and his adamantine heavy sword were to land against a person, the vibrational waves would have a high probability of directly destroying that person's internal organs. The assorted experts of the angel battle formation wouldn't be able to dodge at all. But the great six-point battle formation was different. Its 6 parts were actually made up of 6 people that were formed into one whole. Linley's adamantine heavy sword hadn't actually clashed with any weapons. To be precise, this attack of Linley's was actually aimed towards the entire group of 6 people in that unit, but the vibration traveled in a straight line. Whoever it attacked would be the one to be damaged. This sort of straight-line attack would naturally be avoided by the opponents, especially when Lehman and the others sensed that strange force penetrate the holy power protecting them. Although the speed of the vibrations was quite fast, it would only be enough to injure Lehman. Linley, so this is that legendary technique of yours, the profound truths of the earth. Lehman's eyes were gleaming, and he laughed loudly, haha, if this was the angel battle formation, you truly would be able to succeed, but did you think that the Radiant Church would step in the same pit twice? Haha. Lord Fallen Leaf had a hint of a smile on his face as well. The great six-point battle formation is formed from 6 groups of 6 people. As soon as your profound truths of the earth penetrates the holy energy, they will be able to sense it and can instantly move to make sure their vitals are not struck. You won't be able to easily kill any one of them. Linley, weren't you feeling very confident, just now? One of the special executor saints in the formation said in a cold voice. But Linley began to laugh. Delia, Tulili, Desri, and the others all began to laugh. "Boss, you've made a fool of yourself." Bibi laughed. Linley laughed as well. "I really did underestimate this angel battle formation." The Radiant Church's forces were all rather angry now, because Linley's side was still chatting and laughing amongst each other, as though this formation was nothing to them at all. But at the same time, Lehman, Fallen Leaf, and the others began to feel uneasy. How could the enemy be so confident? Did they have something up their sleeves? Do they have some sort of method to break our formation? Lehman worried. Lehman, shrink the area covered by the formation. Force them into tighter quarters, then kill them. Haydn's voice rang out from afar. Fine. Lehman didn't think about it anymore. The 36 saints of the Radiant Church instantly began to draw closer together, reducing the volume and space covered by this great 6-point battle formation. "Linley, stop playing around with them," Desri said mentally to him. Linley nodded slightly. "Delia, make your move." Linley's voice rang out in Delia's consciousness. Delia smiled slightly, then all by herself, flew at high speed towards Lehman, who paid no attention to her at all. "She dares to draw near? She's asking for death." Lehman laughed coldly to himself. If Linley was to draw near, Lehman would perhaps be a bit nervous, but this was Delia. Why would he care? But just as Delia was within 10 meters or so of Lehman, Delia's aura suddenly transformed. Rumble. An area of several dozen meters around her was affected. Lehman and the rest of his 6, who were closest to Delia, suddenly couldn't move at all, and even the flow of holy energy that was circulating amongst them came to a sudden halt. Because Lehman and his men were unable to move, and the holy energy in their bodies was suddenly separated from the rest of the formation, the entire great 6-point battle formation instantly shattered. She's a deity." Lehman's eyes were filled with shock, but he couldn't move. The other 30 or so saints were utterly mystified. "Lehman, what's going on?" They didn't understand why Lehman and the others had stopped using the formation, and had even stopped circulating the holy energy. Bang! Bibi ripped the skull of one of the saints to pieces. "Haha, you have no clue, right? This God Realm technique, even an imperfect one, is still able to prevent the opponent from moving for an instant." Linley and Delia exchanged a glance, and the husband and wife couple both laughed. The God Realm was definitely the biggest reason why deities were able to look down upon saints with such contempt. Even this imperfect God Realm which Delia used was able to cause the opponent to be unable to move for a second or two. After all, even Linley, upon being affected by it, had been frozen for 1 or 2 seconds. In a battle between saints, these 1 or 2 seconds would determine life and death. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 9, The Descent. Because of the appearance of the God Realm, the great 6-point battle formation had been disrupted in one part, causing the entire great 6-point battle formation to collapse. As soon as the formation had collapsed, Bibi had immediately killed a saint. "Haha, let's begin the slaughter." The practitioner of the way of destruction, Tulili, shouted loudly, and each time the blood-colored scimitar in his hands lit up, a saint was chopped to death. Kill. Barker and his brothers, the 5 undying warrior saints, had ferocious looks on their faces. They roared angrily, brandishing their griataxes as they chopped towards the saints close to them. As for the Grand Magus Necromancer, Zisler, he laughed insidiously, utilizing spiritual attacks while simultaneously ordering his 8 saint-level undead to attack those pitiable saints on the side of the Radiant Church. Die, die, don't you fellows love to kill heathens? All of you, die. As for the fastest person amongst them, without question, that was Linley. With a flicker of his body, Linley charged towards Lord Fallen Leaf. If they were to discuss who was the strongest person on the side of the Radiant Church, Linley's opinion was that it would be this person, the spiritual leader of the ascetics. The skinny Lord Fallen Leaf saw Linley fly over, and he couldn't help but immediately fly backwards in shock and anger. Lord Fallen Leaf, no need to flee. Linley's voice rang out in Fallen Leaf's mind. Swish. A devilish violet light flashed. The edge of that violet light had a hint of faint blue light. Wherever the violet sword went, a small seam in space itself was immediately ripped open. Lord Fallen Leaf's body radiated countless lines of white light, wanting to entangle that blood-violet sword, but as soon as they touched those tiny seams in space, those white threads of light instantly collapsed. Slash. Linley's blood-violet sword chopped down directly towards Fallen Leaf's head. It was like a tiny line had appeared in the middle of Fallen Leaf's skull. The sword sliced through the skull, but the skull actually didn't split apart. Only, a bloody line appeared straight through his head. Linley, Lord Fallen Leaf looked at Linley. In the moment of his death, he thought back to that day when Guillermo had brought Linley to him to be trained as his apprentice. At that time, Lord Fallen Leaf had refused Linley. I will only teach those with kind hearts and pure souls. But your heart is filled with an excessive desire to kill. I will not teach you. Thinking back to that scene, Fallen Leaf had a bitter feeling in his heart. An excessive desire to kill? Who would have thought that in the end, he would have died by Linley's hands? And then, Fallen Leaf's consciousness vanished and dissipated. As soon as Linley's side had begun massacring the forces of the Radiant Emperor, Haydn's, standing at the entrance to the Radiant Temple, began to tremble. His entire body shook, and then he turned towards the white-robed priestess behind him and mentally barked, "Hurry, hurry and ask Lord Chiquita to come, hurry." "Yes, Your Holiness." The white-robed priestess within the Radiant Temple immediately ran at high speed towards the insides of the Radiant Temple. Holy Emperor Haydn's gripped the radiant scriptures, staring at the scene above, his heart trembling. Died. They all died. Haydn's heart ached. These dead saints had been the reason why the Radiant Church had been able to maintain its grip on power in the Yulan continent. Some of these saints might have had the potential to one day surpass him in power and become the next Holy Emperor. Too late. It's all too late. Haydn's felt boundless grief and rage in his heart. But, there is still hope. Haydn's ground his teeth. As long as we can kill that Linley, after a few more centuries of training and gathering new forces, our Radiant Church can definitely grow strong again. Haydn's face suddenly changed. He cried out in shock, "Fallen Leaf!" Right at that moment, Lord Fallen Leaf's corpse fell down from mid-air. As Lord Fallen Leaf died, 28 other saints of the 36 the Radiant Church had started with had died as well. Only 8 were left. The rate at which they had been killed caused the members of the Radiant Church who had witnessed this to feel shock and terror in their hearts. This Linley, Haydn's found out, to his amazement, that Linley next charged straight towards Lehman. Lehman had finally broken free of Delia's Godrealm. After all, her Godrealm was an imperfect one, and was only capable of trapping him for a few seconds. Linley! Lehman roared with fury, delivering a full-force stick smash towards Linley. Wherever the staff passed through, space itself rippled. "Die!" Linley said calmly. A devilish violet light passed through the staff, which instantly snapped into 2 parts. Wherever the devilish violet light passed, space itself was instantly torn apart. The spatial rip actually tore straight through Lehman's body, and his tall, massive body was instantly split into 2 halves. Dimensional decapitator. With a flash of the sword, Lehman's skull exploded. Linley turned and stared at the distant Haydn's. "Haydn's! It is your turn, now." Linley's voice seemed to echo throughout the heavens. With Lehman and Fallen Leaf dead, the saints on the side of the Radiant Church primarily only consisted of early and middle stage saints. In front of experts like Tulili, Desri, and Bibi, they didn't have any ability to fight back at all. In but a few seconds, All 36 saints on the side of the Radiant Church had perished. Not a single one had managed to even escape. Heidens, what, are you planning to hide within the Radiant Temple, beneath the defensive formation of the glory of the Radiant Sovereign? Standing in midair, holding the blood-stained blood violet in his hand, Linley stared down at the terrified Holy Emperor, Heidens. Once upon a time, in Fenley City, the young Linley had wanted to slay the king of Fenley Kingdom, Clady, to avenge his parents. At that time, Holy Emperor Heidens had stood in midair as well, easily dominating and maintaining control of the situation and of Linley. There were hundreds of members of the Radiant Church within the Radiant Temple, but they didn't even have a place to flee. The shattered remnants of the Sacred Isle were surrounded by the sea. If they wanted to flee, they would have to flee into the endless sea, but none of them were capable of flight. Even if one of them was a wind-style magus, Linley's side, including the saint-level undead, numbered over 30 saints. How could they possibly be fast enough to escape? All they could do was hide inside the Radiant Temple. The Radiant Temple was the last thing they could rely on. What should I do? What should I do? Heidens was extremely nervous. The Radiant Temple definitely won't be able to hold on for too long. The greatest, final source of support for the Radiant Church had been the Great Six-Point Battle Formation. The glory of the Radiant Sovereign only relied on the Magi-Sight gems stored within the Radiant Temple to power it, and definitely wouldn't be able to withstand the power of the repeated attacks of Linley's group of 30-plus saints. Why hasn't Lord Chiquita arrived yet? Heidens was frantic. Quick, you go underground as well and ask Lord Chiquita to come. Heidens mentally said to an ascetic behind him. Yes, Your Holiness. This ascetic was very worried as well. Holy Emperor Heidens stared at Linley's group, hovering in mid-air. Instantly, his face changed, because he noticed that Linley and Delia had both fallen silent. No one else was speaking either, everyone's attention seemed to be focused on the two of them. They are chanting a magical incantation. Heidens instantly could tell. They have multiple Grand Mega Saints. If they were to all cast forbidden level spells at the same time, and then have the others attack at the same time, the Radiant Temple definitely wouldn't be able to hold on. Heidens felt as though he were an ant atop a heated saucepan. He was utterly frantic now. He turned his head yet again. Why hasn't Lord Chiquita come yet? What is going on? The Lord Chiquita which Heidens had placed all his hope in had still yet to appear. Chiaini. An enormous, faint blue dimensional edge, at least 20 meters long, suddenly flew out from Linley, carrying a destructive surge of energy towards the Radiant Temple. By Delia's side, a second dimensional edge, 5 or 6 meters long, also flew out. Two-dimensional edge spells, one large, one small, attacking at the same time. How could this dimensional edge be so huge? Everyone hiding within the Radiant Temple, Heidens included, felt utterly shocked upon seeing this scene. Dimensional edge spells were generally 3 or 4 meters long. If they reached 5 or 6 meters in length, it was a sign that the Grand Mega Saint casting it was going all out. 20 meters. How could they have imagined that Linley possessed a monstrously powerful supportive divine artifact like the Coiling Dragon ring? Chiaini. The dimensional edges chopped down against the walls of the Radiant Temple, and the Radiant Temple instantly lit up. A holy, dazzling light emanated out, frantically striving to block the dimensional edge spells, but this dimensional edge which Linley had cast was simply too enormous. Crunch. The entire Radiant Temple shuddered. Many people within it, Heidens included, noticed that the walls of the Radiant Temple were beginning to crack. The Radiant Temple is no longer able to hold on. Everyone, all together, let's destroy it. Warden roared with fury, and then, brandishing the Warblade Slaughterer, charged forward. Instantly, the 3 saint-level dragons, BB, the Barker brothers, the experts all charged forward. But Delia noticed that Linley had suddenly changed. Linley, what is it? Linley, staring at the cracking, shattering radiant temple in front of him, had a very complicated mixture of feelings in his heart. How long had he waited for this day, the day of the destruction of the radiant church? I'm fine. Linley chuckled. HRM, what is that Haydn's doing? Haydn's, seeing the many experts charging forward, ground his teeth, then immediately knelt down. The radiant scriptures he had been holding in his hands suddenly flew into the air above Haydn's, and Haydn's immediately bowed down, pressing his head against the floor. Haydn's entire body began to glow with an eye-piercing brilliant light. Faint lines of blood began to emerge from Haydn's body, staining his white robe. Haydn's raised his head, his eyes shooting forth two rays of piercing golden light, which struck directly upon that holy scripture. Lord, let your glory descend and exterminate these blasphemers. Haydn's voice was incomparably ancient. Bang! At this moment, the radiant temple came under the combined attack of the 30-plus saints, and the magical defensive formation instantly shattered. The 9-floor-tall radiant temple collapsed, and the members of the church within it let out cries of agony. But at the same time, the Holy Scripture began to glow with an incomparably eye-piercing golden brilliance. The golden brilliance floated in the air above Haydn's, forming into golden flower petals. These golden flower petals were slowly opening and unfurling. Linley, Bibi, Tulili, Desri, Delia, and the other experts all watched the scene cautiously. They saw that from within the golden flower petals, a barefooted, muscular man with short silver hair and hemp clothes suddenly appeared, wielding a spear in his hands. A terrifying aura was emanating from this barefooted, muscular man with short silver hair. It is you, who have summoned me. The muscular spear-wielding man lowered his head, looking at Haydn's. Blasphemers! Where? Haydn's eyes lit up, and he immediately pointed towards Linley's group. O Mighty One, that group of saints before us are all blasphemers. The spear-wielding muscular man stood in mid-air, and with 2 steps, he walked outside of the radiant temple, turning his gaze towards Linley's group. The aura which this muscular, spear-wielding man was emanating was one which Linley and Desri were very familiar with. This was the aura of a deity. Linley, this is the apparition of a deity from the divine realm of light. The apparitions of deity are only formed from energy and don't possess divine sparks. Their energy is limited to that of prime saints, and can't possibly reach the demigod level. Desri's voice rang out in Linley's mind. Linley immediately calmed down. However, we still need to be careful. Although the apparitions are constrained by the bounds of these material planes to have the power of prime saints, their understandings of the laws are at their full level. If their true body is that of a high god, then the apparitions will have a high god level of understanding of the laws. Desri's face was solemn. Even if the apparition was limited to the power of prime saints, if the apparition had the insights of a high god, most likely even a demigod would be easily killed by it. The spear-wielding, muscular man swept Linley's group with his gaze. I am Belcabaer Size, the third guardian under the command of Lord Placer Pulaker. Blasphemers. The muscular man's spear suddenly pierced through the air, arriving in front of Linley in an instant. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 10 Lord Chiquitas. Crunch. Although Linley immediately dodged, the spear still pierced through Linley's throat, then instantly returned to Belsize's hands. So fast. Linley felt utterly shocked. A faint green light quickly covered the wound, allowing his throat to rapidly return to normal. Belsize glanced at Linley in surprise, then let out a sigh of approval. I didn't expect that you would be in possession of a pearl of life. It seems that you are the leader of these blasphemers, then. Although he had discovered Linley was in possession of a pearl of life, Belsize was still completely confident. This attack of Belsize had caused all of the experts on Linley's side to feel terror. That attack only pierced through your throat. This next attack, I will use to pierce through your soul. Let's see how you will dodge this. Belsize moved, transforming into a line of bright light and piercing through the air. As for Linley, he immediately utilized the profound truths of velocity to fly backwards and retreat. Linley was fast. But Belsize was even faster. The blood-violet sword in Linley's hand, covered with that faint blue aura, chopped directly towards Belsize's head. Belsize smiled disdainfully. Dodging backwards, he avoided the strike of blood-violet, and then the spear in his hand shot out like a ray of light, piercing through the heavens towards Linley's skull. The speed of this attack was simply too fast, and Linley didn't have any time to dodge at all. Clang! Blood-violet seemed to have teleported, as it clashed against the side of the spear. The spear shuddered, then just missed Linley, passing by his head. Your attack has a hint of the dimensional edge about it, and your speed isn't bad either. Belsize was wielding his spear again, chuckling calmly as he looked at Linley. Even in the countless, myriad planes of the universe, amongst saints, you can be considered to be amongst the highest class. A pity. Belsize's face grew solemn, and then he swept his arm out. Boom! A burst of dim white light shot directly towards Linley. Linley had been extremely cautious, and so as soon as the white light shot at him, Linley immediately flew backwards, retreating without even pausing to think. Hiss! The parts of his body which the white light touched all immediately disintegrated into ash. Whew! Having just barely escaped the area of the white light, Linley let out a secret sigh of relief. Right now, his forehead was matted in sweat. His entirely disintegrated legs were quickly regrowing, and he stared in terror and rage at the distant Belsize. His speed is several times faster than mine. And it seems he hasn't gone all out yet either. Even a casual blow from him is so terrifying. In terms of power and energy levels, Linley and Belsize were on par. But in terms of understanding the laws, the difference was simply enormous. Boss! BB's voice rang out in Linley's mind. If you can't hold on, then flee. BB was nervous as well. Desri and the others had fled far away long ago and were watching from afar. They had to admit that their power was far lower than Linley's. If Linley was unable to defeat the opponent, then they wouldn't be able to either. Hiss! Suddenly, a dimensional edge suddenly shot towards Belsize at high speed. It had been cast by Delia. Dimensional edge. The other experts, Linley included, all felt a thread of hope. Belsize glanced at the dimensional edge, neither dodging nor retreating. When the dimensional edge reached his body, only then did Belsize suddenly retreat at high speed. The dimensional edge flew forwards, and Belsize flew backwards. What? Everyone, Linley included, felt shock and terror, because they knew exactly how fast the dimensional edge was, and yet it was still slower than Belsize. Belsize had a faint smile on his face, easily maintaining the distance between himself and the dimensional edge. After the dimensional edge dissipated, Belsize came to a halt as well. Dimensional edge? It has been such a long time since I have encountered it. What a nostalgic feeling. Belsize sighed. Linley's face changed. It was hopeless. It was utterly hopeless. Retreat, everyone, retreat, quickly, quickly. Linley's voice suddenly rang out in the minds of Tulili, Desri, and the other experts. Not hesitating at all, Tulili and the other experts immediately began to flee in every which way. Fleeing. Belsize's face turned cold. HRMPH. Belsize suddenly raised his level of speed to the limit, appearing in front of Linley in the blink of an eye, and Linley immediately flew backwards. But just at that moment, Belsize's body suddenly came to a halt, a hint of surprise and anger in his eyes. A deity. Linley suddenly realized that Delia was close to them, and he hurriedly, frantically messaged her mentally, "Delia, quick, leave." Delia had just utilized her God realm. However, this Belsize was nothing more than an apparition, an energy construct. He had no soul, only a linked thread of awareness. If this was a true God realm, perhaps there would have been some effect, but this imperfect God realm had virtually no effect on him. Belsize's body paused for only the briefest of instants, and then he turned to look at Delia, his gaze cold. You haven't even successfully fused with the divine spark in its entirety, and yet you dare to use it. Swoosh. The spear immediately shot out from his hands, and the target was Delia. Delia. Linley was shocked. Clang. A metallic ringing sound. The spear returned to Belsize's hands, its mission unaccomplished. Belsize stared at Delia in astonishment. A set of divine battle armor? You actually have divine battle armor. Delia, leave, quickly. I'll hold him down. Quick. Linley mentally said to her frantically. Linley knew that given Belsize's speed, if he chased after any one of them, that person would definitely be caught up to and killed. No, Delia didn't leave. She stared at Linley, her eyes slightly misty. If we die together. Delia, Linley's heart was extremely confused and torn. He hadn't expected that the Holy Emperor, Haydn's, would have this final card up his sleeve. To summon the specter of a deity, and one of such terrifying power, at that. I was overconfident, too overconfident. If I had been a bit more prudent, and had immediately killed Haydn's at the beginning. If I hadn't given him the chance to summon this specter, none of this would have happened. Linley hated himself for his mistake. And at this moment, Belsize charged towards Delia once more. At this point in time, Belsize's primary target had actually become Delia. A divine spark, and a set of divine battle armor, Belsize flew over at high speed. I didn't expect that in this material plane, there would actually be someone so astonishingly stupid. If she had actually finished fusing her divine spark, it truly would be quite hard for me to kill her. But as things stand, a cold light flashed through Belsize's eyes. Delia, quick, leave. Linley was utterly beside himself with panic, shooting towards Belsize at maximum speed. But Linley was behind Belsize, and he was slower than Belsize to begin with. How could he possibly catch up? Shkree! Suddenly, a heaven-shaking, high-pitched shriek rang out, and a black shadow charged forward from behind Delia. Ignoring everything, it charged straight towards Belsize with explosive fury, transforming into 8 shadows, all of which revealed cold, sharp fangs and fierce claws. It was Bibi. Linley was instantly stunned. Bibi, quick, flee. Linley was about to go insane. Bibi, block Belsize. How could he possibly hold? A little mouse. A look of contempt flashed through Belsize's eyes. The speed of the rat-type magical beast in front of him was lower than Linley. How could Belsize be bothered by it? As for this shadow-shaped doppelganger technique, Belsize could tell at one glance where Bibi's true body was. The spear in Belsize's hand swept out. Slash. The spear pierced directly into Bibi's body. But even then, Bibi still opened his maw, wanting to bite down at Belsize, his 2 eyes filled with a hint of insanity. Boss, quick, run, run. Bibi's voice rang in Linley's mind. Bibi stared forcefully at Linley with his 2 eyes. It was as though in this last moment of his life, he wanted to take one more look at Linley. Boss, run for it? Bibi's little eyes were filled with unshed tears. Bibi. Linley felt his mind go blank. Seeing Bibi spitted on that spear, Linley's tears began to fall out uncontrollably. He felt so powerless. He wanted to save Bibi, but he didn't have the ability to do so. Linley's entire body began to shudder from his agony. Huh! Belsize's eyes suddenly opened wide with astonishment and rage. After his spear had just penetrated partway through Bibi, he wasn't able to push any further. Suddenly, a surge of black light instantly erupted forth from Bibi's body, directly attacking Belsize's mind, destroying that linked thread of awareness. As it did so, an ice-cold voice rang out in his mind. Belsize, how dare you? When I have some free time, I will pay a personal visit to your Lord Platter. Belsize's body instantly crumbled away and dissipated. Boss, boss. BB instantly scurried towards Linley. Surprised and delighted, Delia flew over as well. Linley was standing there in mid-air, utterly stupefied. What had happened? Just moments ago, he had been filled with utter despair and regret. But now, the incomparably powerful Belsize had suddenly dissipated, and BB hadn't died. BB isn't dead. Linley's eyes suddenly lit up. BB. Linley immediately grabbed BB, pulling him in for a tight hug. Boss. BB rubbed his little head comfortably against Linley's chest. Delia. Linley reached out to embrace Delia as well. Just moments ago, he had been in the grip of a nightmare, but now, he felt as though he truly understood what happiness meant. Within the shattered remnants of the Radiant Temple, in a room, there was a tall, three-eyed man with a pair of goose-like wings on his back. The man was staring out the window. He had watched the entire battle, from start to finish. Even the specter of Lord Belsize was destroyed. How is that possible? That Linley fellow's power is on par with mine, but there's no way he could possibly destroy the shadow of Lord Belsize. The three-eyed man considered his options. Best to simply leave. As for that Haydn's, leave him to his fate. The tall, muscular man leapt out from within a window in the Radiant Temple. His wings trembled gently, and then he transformed into a line of light, disappearing into the horizon. His speed was incredibly fast, on par with Linley. Haydn's face seemed ancient and decrepit. His eyes were dim. The execution of the deity's descent technique, which was only taught to each holy emperor, was something which had caused great harm to Haydn's. Not just in terms of mage force, his spiritual energy had been entirely used up, and even his soul had been badly damaged. There was no way he could possibly recover without spending a century in rest. He lost. Seeing Belsize's form dissipate, he couldn't believe his eyes. Your Holiness, what should we do? The church members behind him were all terror-stricken. Just then, they had been celebrating their impending victory, but now. Haydn stood up, turning and roaring with anger. Where is Lord Chiquitas? Why hasn't Lord Chiquitas come? Go find him. At this point in time, their one and only hope was Lord Chiquitas. Haydn's had personally witnessed Lord Chiquitas' power before. He should be able to deal with Linley. Haydn's, what are you shouting about? Haydn's turned his head. Linley, with BB in one arm and holding Delia's hand with the other, walked into the main hall of the Radiant Temple. Linley, Haydn's, after having utilized the deity's descent technique, was unable to fight back any longer. Linley, don't be so smug. The Radiant Church will never be destroyed, and the glory of the Lord will forever illuminate the endless reaches of the world. Haydn's growled with fury. Right at this moment, a white-robed priestess came running over. Haydn's noticed the white-robed priestess. This was the one he had sent to go find Lord Chiquitas. Haydn suddenly felt a hint of hope. Lord Chiquitas. The white-robed priestess was so panicked, she was crying. Your Holiness, Lord Chiquitas is no longer here any longer. He's left. I can't find him. I looked everywhere, but I can't find him. The white-robed priestess also sensed what the situation was. No, Haydn seemed to have been struck by a bolt of lightning. He was utterly stunned. Haydn's instantly understood everything. Given how major this battle had been, if Chiquitas had been planning to get involved, he would have done so long ago, but he did not. Clearly, Chiquitas didn't want to get involved, and had fled long ago. Haydn's let out a furious, unrepentant howl. Looking at Haydn's, who was in such agony that he seemed about to go insane, as well as those other terrified high-level members of the church, Linley felt his heart become peaceful. He spoke. The Radiant Church will never exist again. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 11. One night. Boom. The remnants of the sacred isle began to tremble violently, as though there were thousands of enormous beasts beneath it that were shaking it. One enormous crack after another appeared in the sacred isle, and endless amounts of seawater poured in, covering the entire sacred isle. The radiant temple, already collapsed, no longer had the protection of the glory of the radiant sovereign. It was now no different from any ordinary building, and these massive vibrations caused the collapsed radiant temple to break down even more. On the remnants of the island, many enormous boulders were raining down from the skies, and the few remaining survivors of the Radiant Church fled in terror into the seas, hoping to avoid those countless boulders and prevent them from smashing down on them. Forbidden level magic, heaven collapses, earth shatters. Linley stood in mid-air, with Bibi on his shoulders and Delia's hand in his own. He stared from afar at the collapsing, distant sacred isle. Soon, the entire sacred isle disappeared into the ocean without a trace. Where the sacred isle had previously been, there was now nothing besides rolling waves and a few corpses that occasionally rose to the surface of the sea. Linley quietly watched this scene. Delia, conscientiously, didn't make a sound. After a long time. "Let's go." Linley let out a long sigh. Holding Linley's hand in her own, Delia smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "The past," Linley said. "Boss, the past? Do you have some profound thoughts about the past?" Bibi smirked from his position on Linley's shoulders. Linley laughed, glancing at Bibi. "What sort of profound thoughts can I have?" "Enough, let's go home." "Right. Go home." Delia and Bibi both felt their hearts tremble. Just then, the three of them had nearly died, but now, all of them were going home safely. This sort of sudden changes in fortune naturally had mentally affected them. The ocean wind continued to blow. In mid-air, Linley, Delia, and Bibi flew at high speed towards the eastern horizon. Staring into the boundless eastern skies, Linley suddenly felt as though he were staring at everything he had encountered during this part of his life. "Father! Mother! The Radiant Church has finally been destroyed." A hint of a smile appeared on Linley's face. "Father, do you still remember what you told me that year? The two greatest desires you had was for me to bring back the ancestral heirloom of our clan, the Warblade Slaughterer, and for the clan to be restored to its former glory. The Warblade Slaughterer is back now, and the Barrack Empire has been founded. Our Barrack clan is now one of the most powerful clans in the entire Yulon continent. Grandpa Douring, when I was young, I did everything for my father and for the goals of the clan. I took on the hopes of the clan onto myself. If I had been forced to rely on myself for everything, it would have been very hard to accomplish all these things. But because I had you, Grandpa Douring, you changed my life. Training magic, the straight chisel school of sculpting, your help, your tutelage, allowed me to grow one step at a time. It was you who helped me this entire time. When you died, I swore an oath to destroy and uproot the Radiant Church in its entirety. How many years has it been? I've never dared to forget that oath. Now, I've succeeded. Grandpa Douring, I feel so relaxed now. Truly. I feel relaxed in my heart. Right now, I'm holding hands with my beloved wife, and by my side is Bibi, who has braved life and death along my side. Grandpa Douring, if you were still alive, you would definitely feel very happy for me. No matter how much time passes, I, Linley, will forever remember your tutelage for me in my youth. Grandpa Douring, thank you." Soaring above the seas and facing the east, Linley's eyes were so very bright. From his childhood years until now, Linley had always been carrying many burdens. His mind had always been under great pressure, But today, Linley was finally at ease. He could finally live a carefree, happy, wonderful life. The holy Emperor Haydn's, Lehman, and Fallen Leaf had all died in battle. The 30+ other saints had all fallen as well. Even the sacred isle and the radiant temple had turned to rubble and disappeared within the vast sea. Although the Holy Union still had many church members in it, without any saints to serve as their foundation, the radiant church was destined to never be able to flourish again. Dragonblood Castle. Because of the complete destruction of the radiant church, Linley and the others managing to escape with their lives from near certain death, as well Linley finally being able to lay down his burdens, Linley felt extremely happy on this day. All of the saints thus convened at Dragonblood Castle and had a jubilant celebratory feast. This celebratory banquet was such a major affair that even the Emperor of the Barak Empire, Sina Barak, hurried over to attend. "Big bro, I really was so worried, but fortunately, you made it back. Big brother, come, big bro, let me toast you." Warden's emotions were very complicated right now. "Come, cheers." Linley immediately laughed and raised his cup. "Warden, where's Desri and the others?" As this banquet proceeded, Linley felt helplessness in his heart. Warden, Barker and his brothers, and the others, although they had fled during the battle at the Sacred Isle when that Belsize had appeared, I truly don't blame them at all. Linley understood how Warden, Barker, his brothers, and the others were currently feeling. When Belsize had appeared, Linley had ordered them to flee. Desri, Tulili, and the others, including even Warden, who had been emperor for a while, knew that staying behind would have been a very foolish idea. They had immediately fled. Logically speaking, this was the right decision, and the decision that Delia and Bibi had made to stay was a decision that should have resulted in their meaningless deaths. However, from an emotional standpoint, Desri, Warden, and the others still felt a bit guilty. Naturally, during this celebratory banquet, they worked hard to act cheerfully and worked hard to chat, laugh, and drink with Linley, wanting Linley to be happy. Actually, Linley hadn't been angry at them at all. But Desri, Warden, and the others themselves felt nervous inside. "Sina, after this banquet concludes, go to the study. There's something I need to discuss with you," Linley said to Sina. "Yes, uncle," Sina said respectfully. Sina had grown into an elegant, refined-looking man. It was hard to imagine that the massive Warden would have a son like him. Sina, already 24 years of age, had taken on the responsibilities of being emperor years ago. Both in terms of personal ability as well as in imperial management skills, Linley was very satisfied with Sina. After the banquet concluded, it was late at night. Dragonblood Castle. Within Linley's personal, private study. Although Linley almost never used the study, someone would come here every single day to clean it. Naturally, it was very tidy. Today, Linley was making a rare visit to his study. "I wonder why Uncle has asked me to come here." Sina looked at the nearby, peaceful study, his heart filled with questions. The study was shining with lamplight. Late at night, the lamplight was quite eye-catching. Sina was currently the emperor of the Barak Empire, and he had an exalted status. But when Sina arrived at Dragonblood Castle, he didn't dare to put on any imperial airs at all, because the many experts which Dragonblood Castle contained were all the most important, supportive pillars of the Barak Empire. Especially his uncle. Linley was to the Barak Empire what the War God was to the O'Brien Empire or the High Priest was to the Yulan Empire. Empires could lack for emperors, but they couldn't lack for those three. Knock. 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 Sina, somewhat nervous, rapped on the door to the study. Ever since he was young, Sina had only seen Linley a few times. Towards Linley, Sina felt a combination of fear as well as worship. "Come in." Taking a deep breath, Sina pushed the door open. He immediately saw Linley seated before a reading table, currently flipping through a book. "Oh, Sina. Come, sit. Linley smiled in a very friendly manner, pointing to a nearby chair. Yes, uncle. Sina immediately shut the door, then sat down. Linley looked at Sina. He couldn't help but laugh. Sina, it's quite odd now that I think of it. Your father, when he was young, was a handful and a troublemaker, but you've always been very clever and well behaved. In my opinion, you take after your mother, Nina, much more. Linley rather liked Sina. Boys usually take after their mother. Sina grinned as well. Good point. Taylor is quite a handful as well, and Delia herself was quite fierce when she was young. Linley paused for a moment, then went straight to the main topic. Sina, the reason I asked you to come was because I want to tell you something. You have to listen carefully. Linley said with a laugh. Sina immediately focused his attention. The High Priest of the Yulan Empire and the War God of the O'Brien Empire have spoken with me. Their two empires, as well as our Barrack Empire, will join forces and together take over the entire Yulan continent. Our three empires will split the world evenly. Linley said very casually. But Sina, listening, was utterly stunned. As the emperor of an empire, this sort of news was simply too shocking to him. Uncle, this division of the world, Sina didn't quite dare to believe it. Represents that we are going to destroy the Rohald Empire, the Rhine Empire, the Great Plains of the Far East, the Dark Alliance, the Holy Union. This would take decades, if not centuries. Linley shook his head. Sina, during the banquet, you should have learned that just now, we went to destroy the sacred Isle of the Radiant Church. Linley said. Right. Sina nodded, but then his eyes lit up. Uncle. Are you saying that? Sina suddenly understood. It wasn't just the headquarters of the Radiant Church. The headquarters of the Cult of Shadows should also have been destroyed over the course of the next day or two. Once the wars truly begin, think about it. If the enemy has no saints, but we send saints to do battle, will the wars take so long? Sina felt his throat turn dry and his back turn sweaty. His heart was shaking. Uncle and the others are simply too terrifying. They directly annihilated all of the enemy's saints. There is now no way for them to fight back during this war. Even the Holy Emperor himself had died. This meant that the Holy Union now had no leader. Once war descended upon them, most likely the kingdoms and duchies of the Holy Union would instantly surrender. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Linley didn't really care much about this battle. After all, to him, size of territory and population ruled meant little. The most important thing was for him to walk further along the path of training and become a deity as soon as possible. Deity. Becoming a deity represented a fundamental change in the level of one's existence. It meant possessing a divine spark, a god realm, and also being able to draw upon the power of faith. It was a level of existence far beyond mortal ken. Uncle, the three sides shall split up the world, but how? Sina asked. He rather cared about this. Oh, I almost forgot. Linley chuckled. This is how it will work. The territory of the Holy Union and the 18 northern duchies will belong to the O'Brien Empire. The Rhine Empire and the Dark Alliance will go to the Yulan Empire. As for the Rohald Empire and the Great Plains of the Far East, they will belong to our Barrack Empire. Sina's eyes instantly lit up. The size of the Rohald Empire was essentially on par with the Barrack Empire. But more important than that was, the Great Plains of the Far East. The territory of the Great Plains of the Far East was actually enormous in scope, approaching the massive O'Brien Empire in size. But because it was all grasslands, it had a small population despite being massive in size, causing it to only have 3 kingdoms. However, those 3 kingdoms were not to be trifled with. The 3 kingdoms of the Great Plains of the Far East had been able to fight on even footing with the Rohald Empire and Rhine Empire for many years. One could tell from this how strong they were. After all, These people who spent their lives in the saddle of a horse naturally possessed an extremely martial culture. All right, Sina. It's getting late. You should go back and get some rest. Linley said. Yes, uncle. Sina withdrew respectfully. After Sina left, Linley turned his head to stare at the nearby chair. In the seat which Sina had just vacated, there was now a middle-aged man seated there. He was dressed in a long, loose robe, and had a lazy smile on his face. It was the deity-level expert, the king of killers, Caesar. Lord Caesar, your group is heading off to the necropolis of the gods tomorrow. Why have you come here tonight? Linley couldn't help but laugh as he asked this question. Hearing Linley say this, Caesar couldn't help but be startled, but then he pursed his lips helplessly. Right. Tomorrow, we're heading to the necropolis of the gods. Actually, I didn't want to go to the necropolis of the gods this time, but those other guys are forcing me to go. Sheesh. A person can be forced to go to the necropolis of the gods. Isn't it only for those who are willing to go? Linley frowned, confused. Enough of that. I'm pissed just thinking about it. Caesar stood up, walking forward to stand before Linley's table, staring directly at Linley. Linley, I've come today to entrust you with a task. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 12 New Variables. Entrust him with a task? Linley looked at Caesar in confusion. Lord Caesar, pray tell. Caesar was, after all, a major, founding figure of the Saber organization, one of the 4 major assassins' guilds of the Yulan continent. Most mortal affairs, he could simply have Saber handle. For Caesar to ask Linley for assistance definitely meant that this affair was not a simple one. Linley, not too long ago, O'Brien and Catherine, those 2 greedy fellows, said that they wanted to take over the entire world, right? Caesar said. That was the case, yes. Linley nodded. Caesar nodded as well. Whether or not the world is divided up between you 3 is none of my concern. But you should know that Rosary and myself have a special relationship. Caesar chuckled. I understand Rosary's temper quite well. She's remained at the Frost Goddess Shrine this entire time because she truly cares about the Frost Goddess Shrine. Linley nodded. Rosary had been training for thousands of years, but she still remained at the shrine. From this, one could tell how much she valued the Frost Goddess Shrine. How many of the experts of the Radiant Church or the Cult of Shadows who had been in training for thousands of years had remained in their respective churches? After all, the goal of these experts who had trained for thousands of years was to become a deity. If they themselves were on the path to becoming a deity, why would they feel the need to worship a god? Gods required people to have faith in them. Rosary, however, hadn't stayed at the Frost Goddess Shrine this entire day due to her faith in the Frost Goddess. It was because she was emotionally attached to the Frost Goddess Shrine. That day, O'Brien said that he wanted to have the 18 northern duchies belong to the O'Brien Empire. Caesar shook his head helplessly. Actually, it doesn't really matter if he takes them over. Only, you should understand that the O'Brien Empire has an internal regulation that only the worship of the war god, O'Brien, is permitted. All other religions are forbidden. Linley nodded. Even the Radiant Church and Cult of Shadows had only been able to set up intelligence networks within the O'Brien Empire. They didn't dare to openly proselytize on a large scale. Once the 18 northern duchies are subdued, given the iron rule of the war god O'Brien, he definitely won't permit the Frost Goddess Shrine to continue to exist. Caesar furrowed his forehead. I'm worried that Rosary will act in a hot-headed way and fight against the O'Brien Empire. Linley now understood why Caesar was concerned. Lord Caesar, why are you so concerned about something like this? As long as you are alive, I think the war god won't go too far in his actions. Linley laughed. Caesar nodded. Right. As long as I am alive, that is the case. But what if, What if on this trip to the necropolis of the gods, I die? Would the war god still treat the frost goddess shrine with such courtesy? A hint of frustration could be seen on Caesar's frowning face. This. Linley was silent for a moment. Lord Caesar, why do you have so little confidence in yourself? That's not it. Caesar shook his head. Linley, you don't understand. Although all four of us are demigods, there are still vast differences between demigods. For example, saints. Can an early stage saint possibly compare to you in power? An early stage saint? Even a million abyssal blade demons had not been able to stand against Linley, who had killed them as he pleased. The difference between them was as great as that of the heavens and the earth. Although we are all demigods, my strength is the lowest of the four. For example, Dylan. He's already a peak stage demigod, and supposedly, he's right at the cusp of breaking through to become a full god. Caesar shook his head as he spoke. Caesar was only an early stage demigod, after all. The others. The war god had become a deity 5,000 years ago, and the high priest had become a deity over 10,000 years ago. As for Dylan, he, too, had become a deity tens of thousands of years ago. The person with the greatest chance of dying in the necropolis of the gods is actually myself. Caesar said. Then, Lord Caesar, why are you going to the necropolis of the gods? Linley asked. The first reason is, I am forced to go. The second is, Caesar's eyes lit up. A long, lazy, life eventually grows boring as well. I want to once more experience the excitement of life and death struggles. In the past, when I was with Armand, we walked on the edge of life and death. Also, my career as an assassin. That truly was an exciting life. I miss it very much. Caesar still had the heart of a warrior. Linley understood. Warriors such as Caesar wouldn't be able to forever slumber in a quiet lifestyle. What they needed was battle, was heart-pounding activities, was new breakthroughs, was rising to higher and higher levels. Linley, are you willing to help out in Rosary's affairs? Caesar asked directly. Of course I am willing. Lord Caesar, how could I dare to not be willing? Linley said with a smirk. You little punk. Caesar grinned as well. Within 10 years or so, Linley would become a deity. Even more importantly, Linley had a special relationship with Bibi and Beirut. This was the reason why Caesar had come to ask for Linley's assistance. As long as Linley was willing to get involved, even if the war god came back from the necropolis of the gods, he wouldn't act against Rosary. Linley, O'Brien, Catherine. An ancient voice suddenly rang out in Linley's mind. Not just Linley's, the war god at War God Mountain and the high priest in the Yulan Empire both heard this same voice. Linley's face changed. Lord Beirut. I know that you are planning to start a war in the continent. I don't care what happens to the rest of the Yulan continent, but there are two things you need to remember. The first is that you are not to disturb the peace of the Forest of Darkness. The second is that your armies are not permitted to enter the 18 northern duchies, nor are you permitted to engage in slaughter in the 18 northern duchies. Understood? Yes, Lord Beirut. The war god, the high priest, and Linley all simultaneously responded back mentally. Who would dare violate the orders of Lord Beirut? Lord Beirut retracted his divine presence from their minds. Truly terrifying. His divine sense was able to instantly cover the entire Yulan continent. Linley sighed with endless praise. Lord Beirut's power is simply too great. Far above the likes of the war god. What happened, Linley? Caesar, seeing that Linley had become lost in thought, couldn't help but grow confused. Linley looked at Caesar, then understood. Just then, Lord Beirut had only spoke with his divine sense to give orders to Linley, the war god, and the high priest. The other experts didn't know about it. Lord Caesar, weren't you worrying about Rosary just now? Linley laughed. Caesar nodded, looking at Linley questioningly. No need to worry any longer, Linley said. Caesar was somewhat baffled. What's going on? Just now, Lord Beirut mentally spoke to myself, the war god, and the high priest. The 18 northern duchies are off limits. No armies are permitted to invade, nor are we permitted to engage in battle and slaughter there. Linley laughed towards Caesar. Lord Caesar, now you should be at ease. Caesar let out a long sigh, then smiled. But I don't understand. Why is Lord Beirut doing this? Could it be that he is doing it for my sake? I think, I'm not important enough for him to do it just for me. Caesar didn't understand. If you can't figure it out, then stop worrying about it. It's a good thing, right? Linley laughed. Caesar laughed as well. Ha, right. It's a good thing. Right, Linley. I won't bother you any further. After speaking, Caesar disappeared into thin air. Even at Linley's level of power, he could just barely see Caesar's figure transform into a blur, then disappear. This shadow shape technique is at the level of allowing the shadow he transforms into to become completely invisible. How terrifying! Linley sighed in praise to himself. This night was definitely not going to be an ordinary night. Shortly after Caesar had left, yet another person appeared in Linley's study. But when this person arrived, Linley didn't notice his presence in the slightest, and he continued to read his book. Only after he flipped through several pages did he notice out of the corner of his eyes that someone was in the room with him. Linley was instantly so frightened that his heart clenched. Lord Beirut. Linley immediately stood up. The man was still dressed in that long black robe, with black hair, a black beard, and a hint of a smile on his face. It was the king of the Yulan continent, Beirut. Beirut said with a faint smile, Linley, wait a moment. When Bibi comes, we'll talk. Bibi. Linley was confused. Swish. A few seconds later, a black shadow suddenly scurried over, and Bibi jumped directly in front of Beirut. Grandpa Beirut, why have you come? Beirut looked at Bibi, beaming so widely that his eyes turned into merry little slits. Beirut had lived an incalculably long time, but out of all of his descendants, only Bibi was a god-eater rat as well. It could be said, that Bibi, to Beirut, was as important as life itself. The reason I have come today is to bring Bibi back to the forest of darkness. Beirut spoke, while looking benevolently towards Bibi. Back to the forest of darkness? Why do I have to go there? I like being here. Bibi was rather unwilling. But Linley suddenly had a thought. Lord Beirut definitely wouldn't do this for no reason at all. He definitely had some sort of special purpose to this. Lord Beirut, might I ask why you are doing this? Linley looked at Beirut. Beirut patted Bibi dotingly. Bibi, as a divine beast, god-eater rat, has reached the late stage of his growth period. He'll soon reach adulthood. Upon reaching adulthood, Bibi will naturally reach the deity level. This period of time is an extremely important period of time for him. I'm about to become a deity, Bibi said with surprise and delight. Most likely, you'll need another 10 years. These 10 years, Bibi, will be the most important 10 years of your life, Beirut said seriously. Linley understood. Beirut himself was a god-eater rat, and in the countless planes of the universe, Lord Beirut was naturally the person who knew the most about god-eater rats. Linley cared about Bibi as well, and wanted Bibi to develop in a good way and become more powerful in the future. Bibi, go to the forest of darkness. After all, during this period of time, I need to enter closed-door training as well, most likely for around 10 years. Bibi was silent for a moment, and then exchanged a glance with Linley before nodding. Fine, then. But boss, if you are free, you have to chat with me spiritually. Fine. Linley laughed. Beirut had a smile on his face as well. He was very satisfied with Linley's actions. Linley, there's something I must let you know about, Beirut said. Linley's heart tightened, and he immediately said respectfully, Lord Beirut, pray tell. Beirut nodded, then continued. I know that you are all preparing to attack the other empires and to unify the Yulan continent. A few decades ago or a few centuries ago, this would have been an easy task, but now. Beirut shook his head. Linley couldn't help but feel surprised. Beirut's words definitely wouldn't miss the mark. But based on the plans that the war god and the others had drawn up, there shouldn't be any problems. After having exterminated the opponent's saints and then sending out their armies while using their own saints to threaten the enemies, or even use forbidden level magic to frighten them as necessary. This should be a sure thing. Lord Beirut, what do you mean? Linley looked at Beirut. Beirut smiled as he glanced at Linley. This war won't be as simple as you imagine it to be. I recommend that you not be too ambitious. Enough, I've said all I care to say. Time to leave. Boss. Bibi waved farewell to Linley as well. Holding Bibi in his arms, Beirut disappeared from the study. He was so fast that Linley couldn't even tell how Beirut had moved, or what powerful technique he might have used. His technique was clearly on a far higher level than Caesar's. Why did Lord Beirut suddenly give me this warning? Seated in his study, Linley frowned pensively. This war won't be as simple as I imagine it to be? Could it be that something unexpected is going to occur? And he also told me not to be too ambitious. Linley suddenly had a thought. Lord Beirut had also ordered us not to attack the 18 northern duchies. The combination of these various issues felt Linley to suddenly feel a sense of pressure. We have to be careful in waging this war. We need to take it slow. Linley made up his mind. The very next morning, he would go find Sina and give him some instructions. As for tonight, mountain range of magical beasts. Deep within the foggy valley. This place had once been the lair of the armored razorback Wyrm. In the past, Linley had luckily been able to swallow the blood and the draconic crystal of the armored razorback Wyrm, activating the dragon blood lineage in his body and allowing him to transform into a dragon blood warrior. And here, too. Dylan, after Linley drew out Blood Violet. And his 3 six-eyed golden lion sons had been released. In the same location. Raiyayainiap. The space here was rippling like water, with the ripples growing greater and greater, before finally, a huge gaping hole in space was torn. Swish. 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 8 figures charged out at high speed, all of whom appeared to be humanoid. Some of them had horns, while others were covered with tattered robes. The 8 figures that fled out from the hole were all in sorry shape, but they were all wildly overjoyed. Ah, this elemental aura, how wonderful it is. A powerful-looking figure with a pair of ox horns on his head said, so excited his entire body was shaking. Back. Finally, I'm back. Another knelt on the ground, crying in excitement. I've finally managed to escape that damnable place alive. The smell of the earth is so intoxicating. The 8 figures were all extremely excited. Everyone, we've all managed to escape from the Gabados planar prison. Now, let us part ways. A handsome man with pointed ears and long, jade green hair said with a loud laugh. Ha ha, after living in terror for thousands of years, it's time to enjoy ourselves. The 8 figures suddenly left the ground, each flying in a different direction. Book 12, The Descent of the Gods, Chapter 13 Meditative Training begins. The light of the morning sun peaked above the horizon, like a goddess of nature casting her illuminating gaze upon the earth. Within the training fields of Dragon Blood Castle, tens of people were gathered. They had come here to bid farewell to Tulili and Desri's groups. Linley, now that this affair is concluded, you should begin closed-door training as well. I imagine the next time we meet, you would have reached the deity level. Desri laughed while sighing. Linley laughed as well. Desri, Tulili, don't forget that Lord Beirut had said that if you were fast, you would become deities within a single day. Perhaps the two of you will reach the deity level long before I do. Tulili and Desri both began to laugh. Enough, let's head off. Linley watched as Desri and Tulili's group flew into the sky, then transformed into a series of black dots which disappeared into the horizon. Flying, it would be so great if I could fly. Taylor, standing behind Linley, had a hint of jealousy in his eyes. Linley couldn't help but turn to glance at Taylor. The nearby Sina laughed. Taylor, why the rush? Train for a few more years. You've already reached the 8th rank. When you become a warrior of the 9th rank, you'll be at the saint level when you dragon form, right? By then, you'll be able to fly. Taylor, it's your own fault for not having chosen the gold dragon that year. Behind Linley, a beautiful, golden-haired woman said. Sasha, who had only been a young girl all those years ago, had now become an extremely mesmerizing beauty. Given that she also had an extremely high status, there were countless young nobles who were trying to woo her, here in Barrack City. Unfortunately, Sasha's requirements were too high, and she didn't give any consideration to the local nobles at all. Enough. Let's go back to the main hall first. Linley said to Taylor and Sasha. Yes, father. Taylor and Sasha immediately said. Although Linley wasn't too strict with Taylor and Sasha, the two of them hadn't seen him at all during those 10 years Linley had spent within the necropolis of the gods. During their growing, formative years, they hadn't seen Linley, which caused them to feel a bit of dread and respect towards this father of theirs, who was already a figure of legend in their Barrack empire. Within the main hall, there was a 10-meter-long table placed in the center. The experts of the empire, including Zisler and the Barker brothers, were all seated on each side of it. This gathering which our family is holding today will perhaps be the only gathering we will have in the next few years with so many people in attendance. Linley had already made up his mind that once the affairs of the clan had been arranged, he would begin to train and meditate. Only last night's visit by Lord Beirut, as well that strange, sudden warning, had caused Linley to feel rather restless. He kept on having this strange feeling as though some sort of hidden danger was lying in wait in the Yulan continent, and now, the hidden danger was about to reveal itself. But no matter what, training had to be the top priority. After all, waiting around like an idiot was pointless. The sooner he reached the deity level, the better it would be for his family and friends. After all, both Delia and Barker both had divine sparks already, but even if they became deities, they probably wouldn't be too familiar with how to use the laws to do battle at first. Their true source of combat strength was still Linley, as well as BB once he became an adult. Linley, you are going to engage in closed-door meditation. Zisler instantly could understand what Linley meant. Linley nodded slightly. But before I do so, there's some things I have to discuss. Sina. Uncle. Sina immediately said respectfully as he listened carefully. Linley looked at Sina, saying in a solemn voice, last night, although I told you some information about this upcoming world war, at that time, one had taken this war to be a very simple affair. But now, I have to remind you of a few things. You must remember them. Uncle, please speak. Sina said respectfully. The surrounding people, including Delia, the Barker brothers, Wharton and Zisler, all felt confused. The first point is this. Right now, the Barrack Empire, the Yulan Empire, and the O'Brien Empire are planning to do battle simultaneously to conquer and divide up the world. The original target of our Barrack Empire was to subdue the Rohald Empire and the Great Plains of the Far East. But right now, I want you to slow down the rate of attack. Do not be impatient, and do not be greedy. Even if we are only able to take over half, a third, or even less of their territory, that is acceptable. Sina was instantly confused. Last night, he had heard and understood that at the saint level, the alliance of their three empires had an absolute superiority. There shouldn't be any other variables in this war at all. Uncle, Sina couldn't help but interject. Listen to me. Linley frowned, and Sina instantly no longer dared to make a sound. Linley said solemnly, his brows furrowed, the second point is, in this continent-wide war, the aim of our barbaric empire is not conquest. It is self-protection. Sina was even more puzzled now. The final point. I want you, Sina, to be cautious, cautious, cautious. Linley himself understood the importance of this. All your actions should be taken with the goal of being able to protect ourselves. What sort of a person was Lord Beirut? He was someone who could order about the likes of the High Priest, the war god. And Linley himself. Lord Beirut had personally emphasized this matter to him, so this would definitely be a matter of grave importance. After all, events which even Lord Beirut considered to be noteworthy would definitely be very, very few in number. Have you heard my words clearly? Linley barked. I have. Sina frowned, then asked in confusion, Uncle, I want to ask, although we haven't started this war yet, the start and the finish to it should already be set in stone. So why, Uncle? The nearby Zisler, Barker, his brothers, and the others all understood what Linley was saying, but they were also puzzled. They had already destroyed the Radiant Church, while the destruction of the Cult of Shadows had been arranged by the forces under the command of the War God and the High Priest. If war really was to begin, they should definitely be able to win. Linley shook his head. All I can tell you is that the hidden dangers in this war are far greater than you can imagine. Not even deities can underestimate these dangers. All of the experts in the hall felt shock in their hearts. Deities. At present, Dragonblood Castle didn't yet have a single person who had truly reached the deity level. Delia was only halfway through fusing with her divine spark, while Barker had only just begun. Uncle, don't worry. I definitely won't let you down. Sina, now knowing how serious the situation was, immediately spoke out. Linley nodded. He was still quite confident in Sina. Actually, even before entering the necropolis of the gods, Warden had discussed the matter of the next emperor with him. At that time, Warden was preparing to have Linley's son, Taylor, be the next emperor. But Linley had a good understanding of the temperaments of Taylor and Sina. Sina was the type of person who treated others with kindness, but when the time came to act, would do so with the speed and power of a lightning storm. This was the type of temperament that was suited to be an emperor. After discussing this affair, there's just one thing left. Linley began to laugh. Seeing the looks in everyone's eyes, Linley understood what they were thinking. Right. I am preparing to go into closed-door training for a long session. But of course, Delia will go into training with me. Barker needs to train as well. As for the location will be the underground training room. Sina, Taylor, and Sasha looked towards Linley, their eyes filled with worship. Their father, Uncle, hadn't even trained for a century yet, but relying only on his own abilities, was about to become a deity. A deity, to them, was someone who definitely had to be venerated and looked up to. Lord Linley. Barker spoke. HRM. Linley looked at Barker. Barker said with sincerity, Lord Linley, the process of fusing with the divine spark only requires one to study the mysteries of the laws it contains. It doesn't require one to attune with nature. Linley nodded. To become a deity, the natural way required one to constantly train, attune with nature, and gain new insights. It meant that everything one discovered on one's path had to come from within. Fusing with a divine spark, by contrast, basically meant the mysteries of an aspect of the laws were placed in front of you, and all you had to do was to study them. While fusing with the divine sparks, one naturally didn't have to attune with nature. That's why I think that there is perhaps no need for me to enter the underground training room. I'll stay in Dragonblood Castle and do my training here," Barker said. Actually, the main thing was that Barker wanted to spend some more time with his wife. After all, he could pause his fusing whenever he wanted. This was like reading a book. You didn't have to read the entire thing all at once. But of course, the second reason was that Barker didn't want to disturb Linley and Delia. The two of them were husband and wife, after all. With a husband and wife training together, if he were to be there as well, sometimes things might get a little awkward. Perhaps that's for the best. Linley nodded and laughed. But then, Linley turned to look at everyone solemnly. He said, "Tonight, Delia and I will begin our closed-door training. While we are training, unless something extremely important occurs, no one is permitted to come disturb us in the underground room." Everyone nodded. Linley suddenly thought about Beirut's warning again. He hurriedly added, "But of course, if you really do encounter some difficulties or major crises, you need to immediately inform me. Everyone, make sure you know your own limits. In particular, if you encounter something extremely bizarre or dangerous, it's best to inform me early on. Don't act rashly." Without giving them some additional advice, Linley simply couldn't put himself at ease. "Big bro, don't worry about it. We get it." Wharton laughed as he spoke. "Zisler." Linley turned to look at the nearby Zisler. "You are the most experienced person in our group. If anything major happens, you can't allow these people to get in over their heads and cause trouble." Linley understood the temperaments of Wharton and the Barker brothers very well. Although they weren't exactly rash, when they were truly angered, any of them could lose their head in the heat of their anger. "Yes, Lord Linley," Zisler said. Linley nodded slightly. He had already said everything he had to say. Although he didn't know what exactly was hiding within the Yulan continent and why Lord Beirut had warned him, Linley had at least made some preparations. Darkness descended. Deep in Dragonblood Castle, within the pocket dimension. The pocket dimension was surrounded on all four sides by boundless chaotic space. The multicolored, chaotic space, it was indeed filled with secrets and alluring mysteries. But Linley and the others knew full well how dangerous chaotic space was. Even deities wouldn't dare to trespass into it. Holding Delia in his arms, Linley gave her a gentle kiss, then looked at her and instructed, "Delia, you sit there on the stone bed while you train. I'll sit on the floor." Linley, when training in the profound truths of velocity, occasionally needed to actually test out certain moves. Naturally, he needed a bit more space than Delia, who didn't even need to move while fusing with the divine spark. "All right. Understood." Delia nodded obediently, and then looked towards Linley with anticipation. "Linley, focus on your training. Don't worry about me." Linley and Delia both sat down in the meditative position in separate areas. One on the stone bed, the other on the ground. Almost instantly, Linley found himself utterly submerged and attuned to the wind. This time, Linley was wholeheartedly focusing on analyzing the elemental laws of the wind. After all, Linley had almost reached the deity level through his understandings of the profound truths of velocity. As for the profound truths of the earth, he was still a ways off. What Linley had to do right now was to reach the deity level through the profound truths of velocity as quickly as possible. "Ever since I reached the Grand Mega Saint level and had my soul transform, even my speed of training and theorizing has increased significantly." Linley felt more and more confident in himself. And then, Linley's spiritual energy stretched out to attune with the vibrations of the surrounding wind elemental essences. Within his consciousness, the fast aspect and the slow aspect, these two different aspects, began to merge together, and two illusionary swords struck out time and time again in Linley's mind. Linley was constantly testing how to have these two different aspects support and complement with each other, which would allow him to gain further insights in the profound truths of velocity. In his mind, he also envisioned a third sword, which was demonstrating the applications of the profound truths of velocity. Whenever the mental visualizations were unable to resolve Linley's doubts, Linley would rise to his feet and try out his theories in real life. Attuning, hypothesizing, merging, verifying, gaining insights, testing. Linley was totally immersed in all of these things. He forgot the passage of time. In his mental world, there was nothing except those three swords, the fast sword, the slow sword, and the combined profound truths of velocity sword. These three illusionary swords were constantly changing. In particular, the power of the illusionary sword of the profound truths of velocity was increasing non-stop.